Lenor, my eldest son Ralph's wife, paid a rare solo visit to our home, where she normally arrived with Ralph by her side. As I welcomed her in, she wasted no time in delivering her message bluntly. "Don't bother coming to the wedding, Jody. Ralph and I move in different circles," she declared. Lenor's words caught me off guard, though her tendency for rudeness was nothing new. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to make sense of her statement. Lenor let out an exasperated sigh, her demeanor condescending. "I hate having to explain this to you. I graduated from a top university and work at the prestigious trading company where Ralph also works. You, on the other hand, went to some third-rate college and sell insurance. It's embarrassing to have someone like you in the family," she sneered. Irritated, I responded, "There's no shame in selling insurance, you know." Lenor smirked dismissively. "Oh, is Jody upset now? How scary," she taunted. "In any case, the decision is made. Ralph will see things my way," she added, her smile turning malicious. Exhausted, I simply nodded. "I'm Jody, 65 years old, working in insurance sales for the same company since I graduated," I began. Dealing with failed contracts and customer complaints can be tough, but landing a big new contract and receiving congratulations from the sales department makes it rewarding. I continued, "I'm a single mother now. My husband and I had different values and argued constantly. Ralph, our son, witnessed these difficult times. Eventually, the arguments led to the end of our marriage, and despite financial uncertainties, my husband chose not to take Ralph with him. I decided to raise Ralph on my own. Balancing work and parenting through his rebellious phase was challenging, but I managed. The hardworking Ralph I raised recently introduced me to Lenor, a colleague he grew close to at work. Today was the day Ralph would bring Lenor over. Although Ralph and I lived together, he went out to pick up Lenor. When the doorbell rang, there they stood. "Nice to meet you. I'm Lenor. Sorry for the sudden visit. I brought you a little something," Ralph's wife said, handing me a paper bag filled with cookies from a renowned department store. "Oh, you really didn't have to go to the trouble." "Thank you," I replied warmly. "It's just a small gesture," Lenor modestly replied, but I insisted, "No, thank you for the lovely gift. Please come in." With a smile, I invited Ralph and Lenor into our home, and we settled into casual conversation. Lenor shared stories of her upbringing, how she and Ralph grew close, and spoke fondly of Ralph's work life. Then she curiously asked, "By the way, what do you do for work, Jody?" "I'm in insurance sales," I replied cheerfully. At that moment, I noticed a fleeting twist in Lenor's smile. Was I imagining it? I glanced at her again, but her expression had returned to normal. We continued our conversation and wrapped up the evening. That momentary look on Lenor's face lingered in my thoughts. What could it have meant? Since then, Ralph began bringing Lenor around more often as wedding preparations took center stage. With my ex-husband absent from the planning, I had to take on tasks my former spouse would have handled. This was expected since he had refused custody of Ralph. There was much to organize: speeches, responses to family inquiries, and more. I needed to start planning my remarks soon, despite my busy work schedule. Lenor's increasing visits left me with dwindling personal time, making every moment precious. As I pondered, Lenor continued with her questions. Suddenly, she began discussing her wedding dress. "I absolutely must have a bright blue dress with scattered sequins. It will look stunning," she declared. Then she turned to me. "By the way, Jody, what kind of dress did you wear at your wedding?" I hesitated, caught off guard. Ralph should have informed her about my divorce. Before I could respond, Ralph intervened, placing a hand on Lenor's shoulder. "It's okay," he interjected. "Even though she's divorced, it's all in the past, right? I could never imagine being divorced. It would be too embarrassing and miserable. But then, Jody, you're practically a stranger to me, so I can't really understand your feelings," Lenor added with a laugh. Feeling uneasy, I forced a smile and changed the subject. Ralph glanced at me apologetically, but Lenor's expression seemed oddly triumphant. Her increasingly dismissive attitude and constant labeling of me as a stranger troubled me deeply. "Jody's just a stranger, after all," she would say whenever something came up. Ralph would reprimand her, but Lenor's unfairness persisted. Perhaps she truly held a poor opinion of me. Her demeanor was deteriorating, and even Ralph seemed uneasy about her behavior lately. I found myself pondering over Ralph's occasional thoughtful gestures when Lenor unexpectedly arrived alone. The doorbell rang, and I hesitated, wondering who it could be. To my surprise, there stood Lenor, without Ralph by her side. Despite the unease, I welcomed her inside. Immediately upon entering, Lenor looked down at me. Jody, our backgrounds are quite different, so please don't attend the wedding, she stated bluntly. I was taken aback by her abrupt rudeness. What do you mean? I asked, my brows furrowing in confusion. I knew Lenor had a tendency to be brusque, but this was beyond anything I had expected. Lenor sighed heavily. I just can't tolerate your cluelessness, Jody. I graduated from a prestigious university and work at the same top-tier trading company as Ralph. Meanwhile, you're just an insurance salesperson from a third-rate college. It's embarrassing to have someone like you in our family, she added, her expression filled with disdain. I retorted, annoyed. Please refrain from looking down on insurance work. It's not the demeaning job you seem to think it is. Standing up to her seemed to provoke Lenor. Jody's upset. How frightening, she remarked with a sneer. Anyway, the decision is made. Ralph will surely side with me, Lenor declared, flashing a malicious smile. She had made this decision without consulting Ralph first. I was stunned by her lack of consideration. The notion that a groom's mother would be excluded from the wedding was unheard of. It dawned on me that Lenor had been concealing her true nature all along. Exhausted from dealing with Lenor, I simply said, I understand, and escorted her out. Privately, I seethed with frustration. Despite my wariness, I couldn't bear the thought of someone as rude as Lenor marrying my beloved Ralph. Yet the wedding date was set, only a week away. I pondered deeply, then it struck me, I had an idea. Then came the wedding day. At the reception, Lenor's flamboyantly dressed friends greeted guests and collected congratulatory gifts. Meanwhile, the parents-in-law were in Lenor's dressing room. Secretly, I waited in Ralph's dressing room, keeping out of Lenor's sight. Earlier, I had discreetly provided Ralph with a voice recorder and shared my encounter with Lenor from that day. Fortunately, I had recorded it using a recorder I happened to have for work. Upon hearing the recording, Ralph was initially disturbed but quickly grasped the situation. Eventually, he broke down in tears and became furious. For my sake, he decided to call off the wedding and end the engagement with Lenor. However, canceling so close to the wedding date would incur a significant fee. Therefore, we agreed to teach Lenor a lesson she would soon forget. Finally, the wedding ceremony commenced. Taking place in a restaurant, the atmosphere was more akin to a casual reception. I positioned myself discreetly near an exit door where I could observe without drawing Lenor's attention. The host announced the entrance of the bride and groom, and the door opened for Ralph and Lenor to make their appearance. Lenor's initial smile froze into a puzzled expression as she looked around. Ha, she muttered under her breath. On the wedding day, all the relatives were conspicuously absent. It made sense that Ralph's relatives wouldn't be there. Ralph and I had personally asked them not to attend. But Lenor's relatives were also missing. The seats designated for them sat empty, causing discomfort for the parents-in-law who scanned the room awkwardly, clearly perplexed by the situation. Even Lenor's friends appeared baffled, whispering among themselves as they noticed two entirely vacant tables. Sensing the tension, Ralph seized the microphone from the host and announced, "The wedding is canceled. Tonight, we'll simply enjoy a dinner party instead." His laughter filled the room. "What?" Lenor exclaimed in disbelief. But Ralph wasn't finished with his message to her. Amidst the chaos that ensued, he continued, "Today was meant to be my wedding day with Lenor by my side. However, Lenor has consistently treated my mother as a stranger and has been disrespectful to her. She even demanded that my mom not attend today's wedding. Here's the proof." Then, the audio recording from that day filled the hall. "Don't come to the wedding because Jody and I are from different social classes." Lenor's disdainful laughter echoed through the room alongside her words. Lenor's parents, Hugh and Tiana, seemed shocked upon hearing the reason for my absence from the wedding. They turned to Lenor with shaken voices, asking, "Lenor, what is this about? Surely this isn't true. You wouldn't say such hurtful things, would you?" Their faces displayed a mixture of confusion and anger as they confronted Lenor, who stood frozen in her wedding attire, her face drained of color. Ralph calmly addressed Lenor. "Do you now understand why this has happened?" Lenor, visibly distressed, snapped back defensively, "How should I know?" The parents-in-law were too overwhelmed by the unfolding situation to respond. Seeing the silence, Ralph spoke up again, his voice carrying more urgency. "Then let the evidence speak for itself." At Ralph's signal, a staff member opened the door near the exit, casting a spotlight on someone waiting outside. I stood before Ralph, Lenor, and their parents, feeling the weight of the moment. Lenor's eyes blazed with fury as she directed her anger towards me. It's all your fault. You've ruined my wedding, you worthless old hag from some third-rate university and company. Lenor's shout echoed in the room, her disheveled hair and partially ruined gown revealing her unraveling composure. Lenor, what on earth are you saying? That's Ralph's mother. Hugh's voice boomed with reproach. Tiana, visibly upset, added tearfully, yes, Lenor, that's terribly disrespectful. She couldn't hide her disappointment in her daughter's behavior. Before she could continue, I intervened firmly. Enough, Lenor. I understand you don't like me, but I won't tolerate such disdain, especially from my potential daughter-in-law. Lenor clicked her tongue in frustration, her true nature laid bare. I didn't realize you were like this, Lenor. My opinion of you has plummeted, Ralph murmured, his disillusionment evident. Turning to Lenor, I asked pointedly, do you wonder why your own relatives aren't here today? Lenor looked away, indifferent. It's a shame. Your lack of empathy, Lenor, is truly distasteful, I added, echoing her own hurtful words from our earlier confrontation. Lenor glared at me, her expression contorted and difficult to bear. Ralph, too, seemed to be distancing himself from her. Enough of this already. You're being incredibly rude, Lenor snapped, seemingly forgetting her own previous remarks. No, the one being rude is you, Ralph countered firmly, unable to hold back his frustration. Ha! I sighed in exasperation before explaining. Actually, all of Lenor's relatives are my clients. I spoke to them and asked them not to attend. Did you know, Lenor, you once looked down on me as an insurance salesperson from a third-rate company? The company I work for is a multinational corporation, far larger than yours. I earn significantly more than you, and my company is globally renowned. I've been with them since the beginning of their local operations, managing a substantial client base and extensive network. As it happened, Lenor's relatives were among my clients and they agreed to support my decision. By the way, when they learned the truth, they were shocked and decided to distance themselves from Lenor. But she'll find out about that later, I added with a hint of irony. Lenor muttered in stunned disbelief. Well, that's Lenor for you. Slow on uptake, Ralph remarked with a hearty laugh, showing little sympathy. However, his laughter abruptly stopped and he turned serious. I cannot marry someone who disrespects my mother, no matter how intelligent or prestigious your company is. My mother deserves better than to be belittled, I stated firmly, my words almost spat out with determination. Lenor and her parents-in-law stood silently, faces flushed with embarrassment, heads bowed. With the engagement terminated and the wedding cancelled, the event concluded soon after. Lenor's parents, being sensible, apologized repeatedly to Ralph and me. They also agreed to cover all the wedding expenses with further compensation discussions scheduled for a later date. Lenor's responsible parents would likely handle her recent actions. Subsequently, Lenor resigned from her job. Although Ralph and Lenor's workplace wasn't invited to the wedding, rumors of the incident circulated. Colleagues sympathized with Ralph but held Lenor in low regard. In a workplace emphasizing teamwork, Lenor became ostracized. Eventually, unable to endure the constant criticism, Lenor resigned abruptly. She left a resignation letter on her desk and disappeared from the office. Before disappearing, Lenor approached Ralph, pleading for reconciliation. I want us to get back together, she begged. And I want everyone at work to know I'm not a bad person. Ralph, however, firmly declined. With your attitude, going back to how things were is impossible. She also approached me multiple times asking me to convince Ralph to reconcile, but I chose not to engage with her requests. By now, Lenor is likely estranged from her parents-in-law and her whereabouts and activities remain unknown to anyone. Neither Ralph nor I have any desire to seek out information about her. 3 years have passed and Ralph and I live contentedly. We use the compensation money from Lenor's parents to renovate our home. Ralph has since married someone else, a nurse introduced by a friend. She is straightforward and fearless, always looking out for me, and I value her honest advice. Ralph's new wife even offered to live with me, concerned about me being alone. I asked if her parents approved, and she reassured me they were happily married and wouldn't mind. So, Ralph's new family and I decided to share our newly renovated home. We are anticipating the arrival of a new family member soon. Ralph's wife is due to have a baby in about 3 months. Work keeps me busy and fulfilled, and soon our family will grow livelier and more joyful. I eagerly anticipate the upcoming days with a baby and feel motivated by the excitement of our future together.
The necklace felt wrong in my hands. Something about its weight, the way the light caught the stones, it wasn't right. I'd worn Mum's sapphire pendant every birthday since I turned 16, but this year, holding it up to the mirror, I knew. This wasn't her necklace. I'm Mabel, and until this moment, I thought I understood my place in this house. Quiet, accommodating, invisible when convenient. But staring at this cheap imitation dangling from my fingers, something snapped inside me. "Dad?" My voice echoed through our too-large house, past the pretentious artwork Linda had insisted on hanging everywhere. "Dad, where are you?" The sound of newspaper rustling came from his study. He didn't look up when I entered, just kept reading about whatever stock market disaster had caught his attention today. "What is it, sweetheart?" "This isn't Mum's necklace." I dropped the fake onto his desk, where it landed with a dull clank instead of the delicate chime I remembered. He glanced at it, then back to his paper. "Don't be ridiculous. It's the same necklace it's always been." "No, it's not. The original had a tiny chip in the center stone. The setting was platinum, not white gold. And the sapphire... Dad, this isn't even real sapphire. It's glass." Finally, he looked at me. "Mabel, you're being dramatic. Linda had it cleaned last month, that's all." From somewhere upstairs, Chloe's music thumped through the ceiling, as if punctuating my father's dismissal. I pressed my palms against his desk, leaning forward. "Where's the real necklace?" "I don't know what you're talking about." But his eyes flickered away, just for a second. He knew. "Thomas," Linda's voice floated in from the hallway before she appeared in the doorway, all perfectly styled hair and calculated concern. "Is everything all right?" I heard raised voices. "Everything's fine," Dad said quickly. "Mabel's just confused about her mother's necklace." Linda's face softened into that sympathetic mask I'd grown to hate. "Oh, sweetie, I know how much that necklace means to you, but it's exactly the same as it's always been," I wanted to scream. Instead, I straightened up, grabbed the fake, and headed for the door. But Linda's next word stopped me cold. "While you're here, Thomas, we should discuss Chloe's tuition. The dance academy in Paris she's been accepted to is quite expensive, but it's such an amazing opportunity." I froze just outside the study, my heart pounding. "Linda, we talked about this. That money is set aside for..." "For what? Mabel's already working at that little bookstore. She clearly has no interest in college. And Chloe has real talent, real potential." The silence that followed felt like a knife in my chest. "You're right," Dad finally said. "Chloe deserves this chance. We can transfer the funds next week." My college fund, the money Mum had insisted on setting aside for me before she died. They were going to give it to Chloe, my spoiled half-sister who'd never worked a day in her life. I clutched the fake necklace so hard the edges cut into my palm. Through the pain, a clarity emerged. They'd been doing this for years, erasing Mom piece by piece, replacing her memory with cheap imitations, just like they'd tried to replace me with Chloe. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Probably Rachel, checking if we were still on for coffee. But I couldn't face her right now, couldn't pretend everything was normal when my world was crumbling. I heard footsteps approaching and ducked into the nearby bathroom. In the mirror, I barely recognized myself. The girl staring back looked older, harder. She looked like someone who'd finally had enough. The fake necklace caught the light again, mocking me with its artificial shine. I dropped it into the trash where it belonged and pulled out my phone. I had some decisions to make, and they couldn't wait until coffee with Rachel. This wasn't just about a necklace anymore. This was about everything they'd taken from me, everything they thought they could keep taking. But they were wrong. They had no idea what I was capable of. Rachel's spare bedroom felt like sanctuary and exile all at once. 3 cardboard boxes held everything I'd chosen to take from my old life. Clothes, books, and a framed photo of Mom that Dad hadn't noticed missing yet. No fake necklace. I'd left that where it belonged, in the trash. "You can stay as long as you need," Rachel said, leaning against the doorframe. "But are you sure about this? Your dad's going to lose it when he realizes you're gone." I smoothed the bedspread, buying time before answering. He lost me long before I left. He just hasn't figured it out yet. My phone buzzed again. The 7th call from Linda in 2 hours. I silenced it without looking. The book nook called back, Rachel said. They want you to start Monday. Perfect. I'd applied there months ago, sensing this day might come. Minimum wage and irregular hours, but it was mine. No strings attached, no family favors. The doorbell rang, and Rachel's expression tightened. That's probably them. I nodded, my hand steady as I unpacked the first box. You don't have to answer. Like hell I don't. She disappeared down the hall, and I heard the front door open, followed by Linda's theatrical sigh. Rachel, dear, we know she's here. Thomas is worried sick. I'm sorry, Mrs. Carter, but Mabel's an adult. If she wants to talk to you, that's her choice. This is ridiculous. Chloe's voice now, sharp with entitlement. She's just throwing a tantrum because of some stupid necklace. I moved to the doorway, silent on bare feet. From here I could see them all. Linda perfectly coiffed, despite the late hour. Chloe in designer clothes that probably cost more than my new job would pay in a month. And Dad looking smaller somehow, diminished. Mabel. Linda spotted me first. Stop this nonsense, come home. That's not my home anymore. The words came out calmer than I felt. It hasn't been since you moved in. How dare you? Chloe stepped forward, but Rachel blocked her path. After everything we've done for you. Everything you've done? I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. You mean like stealing Mum's necklace? Or taking my college fund for your dance lessons? Dad's head snapped up. You heard that? I hear everything, Dad. I've always heard everything. I just stopped expecting you to listen back. Sweetheart, Linda started, but I cut her off. Don't pretend you care now. Go home. Enjoy your perfect life with your perfect daughter. I'm done being the ghost in my own house. Thomas, Linda turned to my father, are you going to let her talk to me like this? But Dad was staring at me, really seeing me for the first time in years. The necklace, he said slowly. You're sure it's not the same one? Thomas, Linda's voice cracked like a whip. Yes, I'm sure. I met his gaze steadily. Just like I'm sure about where my college fund is really going. Something flickered in his eyes, doubt, maybe, or the first glimmer of understanding. But before he could speak, Linda grabbed his arm. We're leaving. When you're ready to apologize, Mabel, you know where to find us. They left, Chloe throwing one last venomous glare over her shoulder. Rachel closed the door behind them, then turned to me with raised eyebrows. You okay? No. I leaned against the wall, finally letting my hands shake. But I will be. My phone buzzed again. Not Linda this time, but Grandmother Evelyn. Her message was simple. Come see me tomorrow. There's something you need to know. I showed Rachel the text. Think it's about the necklace? Only one way to find out. She squeezed my shoulder. Want company? I shook my head. Whatever Grandmother had to tell me, I needed to face it alone. Just like I'd face everything else from now on. My new job, my new life, my new purpose. Because this wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about justice. About taking back what was stolen, piece by piece, until there was nothing left for them to take. I looked around the spare bedroom, at my 3 boxes of carefully chosen possessions. It wasn't much, but it was a start. And sometimes that's all you need, a starting point and a reason to keep going. Tomorrow, I'd see Grandmother. Tomorrow, I'd start piecing together the truth. But tonight, in this borrowed sanctuary, I allowed myself one moment of pure, uncomplicated grief for everything I'd lost. And everything I was about to take back. Grandmother Evelyn's house smelled like cinnamon and secrets. She waited until I'd settled into her faded armchair, tea growing cold between my hands, before she spoke. Linda sold your mother's necklace 6 months ago. The teacup rattled against its saucer. How do you know? Because I saw her at Rothschild's jewelers. Grandmother's eyes, sharp as ever at 75, fixed on mine. She claimed it was being cleaned, but I know Marcus Rothschild. He told me she brought it in for appraisal, then sold it the same day. My throat tightened. Did Dad know? Your father sees what he wants to see. She reached for a leather-bound folder on the side table. But I've been watching and documenting. Inside were bank statements, photographs, receipts, a paper trail of Linda's manipulations stretching back years, credit card charges under Dad's name for Chloe's shopping sprees, investment accounts drained and reopened under Linda's maiden name. She's been stealing from all of us, Grandmother said quietly, using Thomas's grief like a weapon, isolating him from anyone who might notice. Why show me this now? Because you're ready to fight back. She pulled out one final document, an application for an online business degree program. And I'm ready to help you. I stared at the application, already filled out with my details. How did you... I've been planning this since Linda sold that necklace. The tuition's covered. I've set up a private account she can't touch. All you need to do is sign. My hands shook as I took the paper. Dad will never forgive this. Your father needs to learn that forgiveness isn't always the answer. Grandmother's voice hardened. Sometimes justice matters more. The doorbell rang, startling us both. Through the window, I glimpsed Linda's Mercedes in the driveway. Perfect timing, Grandmother muttered, gathering the documents. Hide these upstairs, then come back down. Let's hear what story she's spinning today. I took the stairs 2 at a time, heart pounding. From above, I heard Linda's voice, honey-sweet with concern. Evelyn, I'm worried about Mabel. She's making such rash decisions. Is that why you're here? Concerned for Mabel? Grandmother's tone could have frozen fire. Of course, she's family. Like her mother's necklace was family. Silence fell like a blade. I crept halfway down the stairs, staying just out of sight. Through the railing, I watched Linda's perfect posture stiffen. I don't know what you're implying. No implications, Linda. I know you sold it, just like I know about the accounts you've been draining, the credit cards you've opened in Thomas's name. That's ridiculous. Thomas handles all our finances. Does he? Or does he sign what you put in front of him, too afraid of rocking the boat to actually read it? Linda's mask slipped, just for a moment. You can't prove anything. Want to bet? Grandmother's smile was razor-sharp. I may be old, Linda, but I'm not blind, and I'm not nearly as helpless as you'd like to think. Is that a threat? Consider it a warning. Whatever you're planning with Mabel's college fund, don't. Linda laughed, but it sounded hollow. Or what? You'll tell Thomas? He'll never believe you over me. I'm his wife. And I'm his mother. The question is, Linda, are you ready to find out which of us he'll choose? The front door slammed so hard the windows rattled. I waited until Linda's car disappeared before coming downstairs. Grandmother sat heavily in her chair, suddenly looking every one of her 75 years. Well, that should keep her busy for a while. What if she tells Dad? Let her. Sometimes you have to break something completely before you can fix it properly. She nodded at the application I still clutched. Are you ready? I thought about the fake necklace in the trash, about years of disappearing into the background of my own life, about Mom, who'd wanted so much more for me than this. Yes, I signed my name with steady hands. But I want to do more than just study. I need to understand everything, the business, the accounts, all of it. I need to know exactly what she's been doing. Grandmother smiled, and for a moment I saw the steel beneath her gentle exterior. Good, because that's exactly what we're going to teach you. I looked down at my signature, feeling the weight of the moment. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about reclaiming everything that had been stolen, not just a necklace or money, but my voice, my power, my place in the world. And I was just getting started. 3 months into my online classes, the headache started. My laptop screen blurred at 2 a.m. as I tried to finish another assignment between work shifts at the Book Nook. Coffee wasn't cutting it anymore. You look terrible, Rachel said, dropping a sandwich on my desk. When's the last time you actually slept? I checked my phone. Another missed call from Dad. Sleep is for people who aren't trying to rebuild their lives from scratch. You're going to crash. I'm fine. The lie tasted bitter, like the cold coffee I'd been nursing for hours. My phone buzzed again, not Dad this time, but a video message from Chloe. Against my better judgment, I opened it. There she was, posing against a shiny red convertible. My college fund, transformed into German engineering. Thanks for the wheels, sis. Her laugh echoed through my tiny room. Paris is amazing, by the way. You should visit. Oh, wait, you can't afford it. Too busy playing shop girl. The phone slipped from my trembling fingers. Mabel? Rachel reached for me, but I was already moving, grabbing my coat. I need air. The night shift at the book nook was usually quiet, perfect for studying, usually. Tonight, the empty aisles felt like they were closing in. You're early, Marcus, the owner, said as I tied on my apron. Everything okay? Fine. I started reorganizing the already neat fiction section, trying to steady my hands. Your grandmother called earlier. He hesitated. Said something about your father coming by. The book I was holding hit the floor. What? He was here this afternoon, asking questions about your schedule. My carefully constructed walls started cracking. Dad had never visited the store before, never showed any interest in my new life. Did he say why? Marcus shook his head, but he seemed worried, different from what you described. The bell above the door chimed. I turned, expecting another late-night browser, but instead found Linda standing there, perfect as always in her designer coat. Well, she said, this is quaint. I straightened, forcing my voice steady. We're closing. Oh, I'm not here to shop. She pulled out a familiar leather folder, grandmother's documentation. My heart stopped. I'm here to make a deal. Marcus disappeared into the back, leaving us alone among the shelves. How did you get that? Your grandmother should really upgrade her home security. Linda's smile was razor sharp. Drop the online classes, stop filling Thomas's head with doubts, and these papers disappear. Keep pushing, and I'll show him exactly how his mother's been conspiring against his wife. You're blackmailing me with evidence of your own crimes? I'm offering you a choice. Back off, or watch your father lose the last bit of family he trusts. The security camera in the corner blinked steadily. Linda hadn't noticed it, too busy savoring her perceived victory. You know what's funny? I reached under the counter, pressed the button that would save the security footage. You still think this is about Dad? Her smile faltered. This stopped being about him the moment you sold Mom's necklace. I stepped closer, voice low. You want to show him those papers? Go ahead. But first, explain where the money went. Every account, every transaction. I'm sure he'd love to hear about the offshore transfers. You're bluffing. Try me. I nodded toward the camera. And maybe explain why you're threatening an employee on private property. I'm sure the police would be interested. The color drained from her face. You've changed. No, I've just stopped pretending to be the person you wanted me to be. She left without another word, but her presence lingered like poison. As soon as she was gone, my legs gave out. I slid down behind the counter, breathing hard. Marcus found me there minutes later, handed me a cup of tea. Want to talk about it? No. I pulled out my phone, dialed grandmother's number. But I need to make some changes. The game had shifted. Linda was desperate enough to break into grandmother's house, which meant we were closer to the truth than I'd realized. But she'd also shown her hand, and her weakness. It was time to stop playing defense. Time to show them exactly what happened when you push too far. The headache pounded behind my eyes, but for the first time in months, my vision was perfectly clear. The graduation ceremony felt surreal, like watching someone else's life through a fogged window. My name echoed through the auditorium. Mabel Carter, Business Administration, summa cum laude. And only 2 people applauded. Rachel and grandmother, tucked away in the back row, exactly as we'd planned. No one else knew. Not Dad, not Linda, not Chloe. They thought I was still just the quiet bookstore girl, head down, no ambitions. Marcus was waiting at the book nook afterward, a wrapped package in his hands. "Congratulations, Manager Carter." I froze halfway through the door. "What?" "Unless you're not interested in running this place." He smiled, pushing the package toward me. "I'm expanding to 3 new locations. Need someone I trust to handle this one." Inside the package was a set of keys and a contract. My hand shook as I read the terms. Full management control, profit sharing, option for partial ownership after 2 years. "I don't understand." "Why me?" "Because you turned my failing bookstore into the most profitable independent shop in the city, all while getting your degree." He tapped the contract. "And because you're ready." The bell chimed. Dad walked in, looking older than I remembered. "Mabel." He stopped short, taking in my graduation gown. "What is this?" Marcus squeezed my shoulder and disappeared into the back, leaving us alone. "Surprise." The word came out harder than I intended. "Turns out you can get an education without a trust fund." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Would it have mattered? Or would Linda have convinced you it was just another cry for attention?" He flinched. "I've been trying to call you." "I know." I folded the contract carefully, tucking it away. "Why are you here, Dad?" "Linda's been—" He paused, struggling. "There are discrepancies in our accounts. Things I can't explain. Your grandmother suggested I talk to you." Of course she had. Grandmother's chess game was reaching its endgame. "Funny timing," I said. "Now that the money's gone, you're finally asking questions." "That's not fair." "No?" I grabbed my phone, pulled up Chloe's video. "Is this fair? My college fund turned into her convertible. Or how about Mom's necklace being sold without anyone asking me?" He went pale. "What are you talking about?" "Ask your wife." I handed him a copy of Linda's transaction records. Not all of them, just enough to start the cracks spreading. "Ask her about Rothschild's jewelers. Ask about the offshore accounts. Ask about everything you've been too afraid to see. This can't be right." "Can't it?" I moved behind the counter, where I'd stood that night Linda threatened me. "You know what the worst part is? I actually believed you didn't know, that she'd fooled you completely. But maybe you just found it easier to let her handle everything, including me." "Mabel, please. Congratulations on your daughter's graduation, Dad." I straightened my shoulders, felt the weight of the manager's keys in my pocket. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a business to run." He left the store looking shell-shocked, the papers clutched in his hand. As soon as he was gone, Rachel emerged from the history section. "You okay?" "No." I pressed my palms against the counter, steadying myself. "But I will be." My phone buzzed. A text from grandmother. "Linda's calling emergency family meeting tonight. It's starting." Another message followed immediately. "Be careful. She's desperate." I thought about the security footage from that night, safely backed up in 3 different locations. Thought about the trail of evidence we'd carefully laid out, the trap slowly closing. "What are you going to do?" Rachel asked. The contract Marcus had offered sat heavy in my bag, representing everything I'd fought for. Everything I could lose if this went wrong. But I was done being careful, done playing the long game. "I'm going to that meeting." I pulled out my keys, not just a shop girl's keys anymore, but a manager's, an owner's. It's time they learned what happens when you underestimate the quiet one. Rachel's expression shifted. "Want backup?" "No." I locked the register, straightened the counter displays one last time. This needs to come from me, alone. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the street in shades of gold and shadow. Somewhere across town, Linda was gathering her forces, preparing for battle. She had no idea what was coming. None of them did. The family meeting exploded exactly as expected. Papers scattered across Dad's mahogany desk, Linda's carefully constructed lies crumbling under the weight of bank statements and transaction records. But I hadn't anticipated Chloe's announcement. "I'm having a party at the Grand Rose next week," she declared, cutting through the chaos. "A proper homecoming. The whole family will be there." My stomach dropped. The Grand Rose, my venue, The one Marcus had just put me in charge of managing. Absolutely not, Linda snapped. Not with everything that's already booked. Chloe's smile was pure venom. Daddy approved it last month. Right, Daddy? Dad nodded absently, still staring at the evidence of his wife's betrayal. I signed something. Perfect. Chloe turned to me. You'll come, won't you, sis? Show everyone how well you're doing with your, what was it, book sorting? The trap was obvious. She wanted to parade her success, my stolen success, in front of everyone who mattered in our social circle. One final humiliation. She had no idea she'd just handed me exactly what I needed. Wouldn't miss it. I gathered my copies of the evidence, leaving the originals with Dad. Send me the details. Grandmother caught my arm as I left. Be careful. When cornered animals attack, they make mistakes. I squeezed her hand. Trust me. But walking into the Grand Rose the next morning, my confidence wavered. The staff, my staff, technically, were already preparing for Chloe's party. Crystal champagne flutes, imported flowers, a string quartet setting up in the corner. My phone buzzed. Linda, stay away from the party. Last warning. Another message followed. Or should we discuss how you really got that management position? My hands went cold. She couldn't know about. Miss Carter? One of the waiters approached. There's been a problem with the liquor license. And the health inspector is here. Says there was an anonymous complaint. Of course. Linda's revenge, attack the venue, destroy my credibility with Marcus. The next hours blurred into a nightmare of bureaucratic chaos. Every permit challenged, every certification questioned. By afternoon, 3 vendors had cancelled, citing payment concerns. The string quartet backed out after receiving an anonymous email about the venue's financial instability. I found myself in the empty ballroom, surrounded by half-finished decorations and mounting disasters. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing, Marcus wanting updates, staff asking for direction, Linda's threats becoming more specific. Still playing manager? Chloe's voice echoed from the doorway. She walked in, designer heels clicking on marble. God, it's worse than I expected. Linda was right. You're completely out of your depth. Get out. Or what? She ran a finger along a table, checking for dust. You'll tell Daddy. Show him more papers. Face it, Mabel, you're nothing. Just a sad little girl playing dress-up in someone else's life. My vision blurred. Everything I'd built, everything I'd fought for, crumbling under the weight of their combined assault. The party starts in 4 hours, Chloe continued. Try not to embarrass yourself too much when you're serving drinks. She left me there, surrounded by the wreckage of my plans. My phone buzzed again. Marcus, probably hearing about the mounting problems. I couldn't face him. Couldn't admit that I'd let Linda outmaneuver me, let Chloe turn my moment of triumph into another humiliation. Rachel's contact photo lit up my screen. I almost declined the call, but her voice was exactly what I needed. They're trying to shut down the venue, I said before she could speak. Linda's destroying everything and I can't. Stop. Rachel's tone cut through my panic. Remember what you told me when you first moved out, about being done playing their game? This is different. No, it's not. They're still trying to make you play by their rules, so change the game. I looked around the ballroom, seeing it through new eyes. Every crisis they'd created, every obstacle they'd thrown up. They all assumed I'd try to fix things their way, try to salvage their perfect party. But I wasn't that person anymore. Rachel, I said slowly, I need you to make some calls. What are we doing? I smiled, feeling the weight lift from my shoulders. We're going to give them exactly the party they deserve. 4 hours, just enough time to show them what happens when you push the quiet one too far. Just enough time for revenge. The Grand Rose's ballroom filled with society's finest, all here to witness Chloe's triumphant return. Crystal glasses clinked, the replacement string quartet played, and everyone pretended not to notice the tension crackling through the air. I stood at the manager's podium, watching Linda's face as she realized none of her sabotage had worked. Every crisis handled, every gap filled, every detail perfect, just not the way she'd expected. "What is this?" Chloe hissed, grabbing my arm. "Where are the imported flowers? The champagne fountain?" "Management decision." I smiled, gesturing to the simple elegance that had replaced her gaudy choices. "Budget constraints." "Budget? Do you know who I am?" "Miss Carter?" One of my staff approached. "Your grandmother has arrived." Grandmother Evelyn entered like a queen, commanding attention without effort. But it was what she carried that made Linda go pale, Mom's sapphire necklace glinting in the chandelier light. "Found this at a certain jeweler's shop," Grandmother announced, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. Imagine my surprise when Marcus Rothschild told me who sold it to him. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Linda stepped forward, face tight. "Evelyn, this isn't the time." "Oh, I think it's exactly the time." I moved to the center of the room, taking the microphone. "Welcome, everyone, to the Grand Rose. I'm Mabel Carter, venue manager and co-owner." The silence was absolute. In the corner, Dad straightened, really looking at me for the first time all evening. Some of you know me as the quiet bookstore girl, others as the family disappointment. My voice carried clearly, years of practice hiding any tremor. "Tonight, I'm here to tell you a story about legacy." "Mabel," Linda warned, but I continued. "A story about a necklace passed down through generations, sold without consent. About a college fund drained for dance lessons and sports cars. About a family that thought silence meant weakness." Chloe lunged for the microphone, but Rachel, perfectly positioned, stepped between us. "Careful," she murmured. "Security's watching." "While you were all busy underestimating me," I continued, "I was building something. Learning. Growing. Tonight isn't just Chloe's homecoming party, it's my revelation party." I nodded to the staff, who unveiled the screens around the room. Security footage played silently, Linda threatening me at the bookstore, Chloe's taunting video messages, bank statements showing the systematic theft of my inheritance. "You see," I turned to Linda, whose composure was cracking, "I learned from the best. Every scheme, every manipulation, every quiet power play. You taught me well, stepmother." "Thomas," Linda appealed to my father, "she's lying." "No." Dad's voice was heavy with realization. "She's not." Grandmother stepped forward, the sapphire necklace catching the light. "The board of directors has been informed of your financial irregularities, Linda. They're very interested in discussing them. You can't prove—" "Actually," I cut in, "I can prove everything. Every transaction, every forged signature, every stolen moment of my mother's legacy. The question is, what happens next?" The room held its breath. Chloe, for once, was speechless. Linda's carefully constructed world was crumbling, and she knew it. "Security will escort you out," I said quietly. "The police have questions about certain financial discrepancies. And Dad—" I met his eyes. "I think it's time for some family counseling." "You vindictive little—" Linda started forward, but stopped short as Grandmother placed the necklace around my neck. "My granddaughter," she announced to the room, "has not only earned back her inheritance but multiplied it. The family estate will reflect that reality." The sapphire felt cool against my skin, its weight familiar and right. Linda and Chloe were escorted out, their protests fading into the night. Guests murmured and whispered, the evening's entertainment far exceeding their expectations. Dad approached slowly, looking lost. "Mabel, Not tonight." I touched the necklace, feeling its truth. "We'll talk, but not tonight. Tonight is about reclaiming what was taken, all of it." The party continued around us, but something had shifted. The quiet bookstore girl was gone, replaced by someone stronger, someone who'd learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction, it's success. And as I stood there, surrounded by the life I'd built from their betrayal, I realized revenge wasn't what I wanted anymore. I wanted something better. I wanted forward. The Grand Rose emptied slowly, whispers and speculation trailing behind each departing guest. I stood at my manager's podium, fingers tracing the edge of Mom's necklace, when I noticed something odd about the clasp. A tiny seam, almost invisible unless you knew where to look, the kind of detail only someone intimately familiar with the piece would recognize. My hands shook as I worked the hidden mechanism. The sapphire setting clicked open, revealing a folded slip of paper, yellowed with age but perfectly preserved. I always wondered if you'd find it. Grandmother appeared beside me, her eyes bright. Your mother showed me the secret compartment the day before she died. Said it was for when you were ready. The paper felt fragile between my fingers as I unfolded it. Mum's handwriting, still as elegant as I remembered. My dearest Mabel, if you're reading this, you've discovered that strength isn't always about being the loudest voice in the room. Sometimes it's about waiting, watching, building something of your own. I'm sorry I couldn't be there to teach you this myself, but knowing you found this means you've already learned it on your own. Remember, legacy isn't just what we inherit, it's what we choose to build from the pieces we're given. All my love, Mom. The words blurred as tears threatened, but I refused to let them fall. Not here, not now. She would have been proud, Grandmother said quietly. Not of the revenge, though I must admit that was rather spectacular, but of who you've become despite everything they tried to make you. Dad cleared his throat behind us. He stood awkwardly in the emptying ballroom, looking smaller without Linda's shadow. The police want statements tomorrow, about the financial records. I nodded, tucking Mom's letter safely away. I'll be there. Mabel, He stopped, started again. I failed you, over and over. Yes, I said simply. You did. Rachel appeared with my coat, ready to run interference, but I waved her off. This needed to happen. I don't expect forgiveness, Dad continued, but I'd like to try something. Whatever you're willing to allow. I thought about Mum's words, about legacies and choices and building from broken pieces. Coffee, I said finally. Once a month, neutral ground. We'll see where it goes. He nodded, relief and regret warring on his face. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I straightened my shoulders, feeling the weight of the necklace, the letter, everything they represented. Trust takes time to rebuild, if it can be rebuilt at all. I understand. As he left, Grandmother squeezed my hand. You're being kinder than they deserve. No. I looked around the ballroom, my domain now, earned through every sleepless night and hidden tea. I'm being exactly who I choose to be. That's the difference. The staff was cleaning up, resetting the room for tomorrow's events. Life moving forward, just as it should. The necklace suits you, Rachel said, joining us. Though I have to ask, was it worth it? All of this? I touched the sapphire, feeling the hidden compartment with its precious cargo. Thought about the girl I'd been, invisible and voiceless, and the woman I'd become. It was never about the necklace, I said, or even about revenge, really. It was about proving something. To them. To myself. Grandmother smiled, knowing and proud. And what did you prove? I looked out over my domain, the grand ballroom where I'd finally found my voice, the staff who respected me not for my name but for my work, the future stretching out before me, full of possibilities I'd built for myself. That legacy isn't what they take from you, I said, Mom's words echoing in my heart. It's what you choose to build from the pieces they leave behind. The last guests were leaving, the night winding down. Tomorrow would bring police statements and newspaper headlines, lawyers and consequences. But tonight, in this moment, I felt nothing but peace. I'd gotten everything I wanted, but not in the way I'd expected. Revenge had transformed into something better, into growth, into strength, into a future entirely my own. Mum would have understood. She'd known all along. The sapphire caught the light one last time as I turned off the chandeliers, its blue depths holding not just the past now, but the promise of everything still to come.
Happy birthday, babe. Jonah's cheerful voice rung out as he entered the dimly lit restaurant, a small gift box in his hand. I couldn't help but beam at the sight of my boyfriend of 5 years. You didn't have to get me anything, I said, pulling him into an embrace. like I'd missed the chance to spoil my girl on her birthday. Jonah grinned and placed a soft kiss on my forehead. We settled into our usual corner booth, the flicker of candlelight dancing across the red checkered tablecloth. As we caught up over breadsticks and wine, something seemed off about Jonah's demeanor. He kept glancing toward the entrance, his leg bouncing with nervous energy. Before I could inquire, the door swung open, and a familiar face sauntered in. My cousin Celine, looking runway ready in a skin-tight crimson dress that left little to the imagination. "Sorry I'm late," Celine sing-songed, draping herself over Jonah to plant an audacious kiss on his cheek. Traffic was just dreadful. My stomach bottomed out as realization struck. This wasn't just a family dinner. Jonah had planned this, whatever this was. "Celine, I'm surprised to see you here." The words felt like shards of glass in my mouth. "Well, when Jonah invited me to celebrate your birthday, how could I refuse?" She looped her arm through his with a sickly sweet smile. "He insisted we needed a reunion." My hands trembled as I clutched my napkin, my gaze flickering between my cousin and my boyfriend, silently begging one of them to reveal this was an elaborate joke. But Jonah wouldn't meet my eyes, his face flushed with guilt. The air grew thick with tension until Celine broke the silence with a melodic giggle. "Oh, Lena, you should see your face. I suppose the cat's out of the bag now." She nuzzled closer to Jonah, her perfectly manicured nails tracing his arm. "We didn't mean for you to find out this way, but Jonah and I are in love." The world collapsed around me in that instant. My ears rang as Jonah muttered something about trying to find the right time, and Celine prattled on about fate bringing them together. I was vaguely aware of other patrons gawking at our train wreck of a scene, but I couldn't bring myself to care. Hot, angry tears streamed down my cheeks, blurring my vision of these two despicable people before me. In that moment, all the history, all the betrayals and toxic dynamics of my relationship with Celine came rushing back with the force of a tsunami. The cousin I once considered a sister, who had torn me down at every turn and sabotaged any happiness I found. Now she'd taken the one person I trusted above all others. "How could you?" I choked out, bobbing my head between them. With her?" Jonah opened his mouth to respond, that familiar crease furrowing his brow, but I shoved myself away from the table with such force, my chair clattered to the floor. "Save it," I spat, snatching up my purse. "I can't even look at you two right now." I stormed out with as much dignity as I could muster, leaving behind the shattered remnants of the life I thought I knew. My world had shifted on its axis, throwing me violently off kilter, and there was no way to regain my balance, not after this unforgivable betrayal. I spent the night tossing and turning, replaying the horrific scene at the restaurant over and over. How could Jonah, the man I thought I knew better than myself, betray me in such a cruel way? And with Celine of all people, my own flesh and blood. The next morning, I dragged myself to Aunt Mara's place, desperate for some familial comfort and support. She pulled me into a tight hug as soon as I stepped through the door, her eyes full of pity. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry," she soothed, guiding me to the living room couch. "I can't believe those two did this to you." Sniffling back tears, I searched her face for answers. Did you know about them?" Aunt Mara sighed deeply, wringing her hands. "I had my suspicions, but I didn't want to believe it. Not without proof." My heart plummeted. "What do you mean, suspicions? For how long has this been going on?" "A few months at least," she admitted reluctantly. "Celine has always been manipulative, pulling strings to get what she wants. I just hoped the family connection would stop her from going that far." White-hot rage bubbled up inside me. "You knew she was up to something, and you didn't warn me?" "I didn't have any solid evidence, Lena, just little things here and there that seemed off. By the time I put it together, I was already the punchline," I finished bitterly. "Played for a fool by the man I loved and my own cousin." "I wanted to protect you both," Aunt Mara insisted. "Celine, she's troubled, yes, but she's still family. I hoped I could appeal to that part of her, the part that used to adore you like a sister." I barked out a harsh laugh. "She sure has a funny way of showing it. Don't you remember how close you two used to be?" Aunt Mara's eyes shone with unshed tears. "You were inseparable as kids, thicker than thieves. What happened between you?" The memories came flooding back. Summers spent choreographing dance routines, sharing snacks during sleepovers, whispering secrets and dreams in the dead of night. We'd been best friends, partners in crime, until high school when a rift formed, an invisible wedge driving us further and further apart each year. I don't know, I lied, swallowing hard against the lump in my throat. Of course, I knew what had torn our bond to shreds, but dredging up old wounds would only lead to more pain. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us before Aunt Mara spoke again. Celine has always been jealous of you, you know. All your accomplishments, your kind heart, your integrity, she's never had that solid moral core. My jaw ticked as an idea blossomed in the back of my mind. Well, this time her lack of integrity has gone too far. I won't let her get away with this. Lena, Aunt Mara looked stricken. I know you're hurting, but seeking revenge won't heal those wounds. It will only breed more toxicity. I'm not looking for revenge, I stated coolly, squaring my shoulders. I just want justice. For once, I want Celine to face the consequences for her cruelty and manipulation, and I'm going to make sure she does. Aunt Mara opened her mouth to protest further, but I cut her off with a raised hand. Thanks for being honest with me, Aunt Mara. I think I know what I need to do now. I stood abruptly and marched toward the front door, a newfound determination igniting in my chest. If Aunt Mara wouldn't help me expose her devious daughter, I would find a way to bring Celine down on my own, no matter what it took. The next few weeks at Wilson Elementary were a welcome distraction. I threw myself into preparing for the upcoming science fair, my mind focused on supporting my students' projects rather than dwelling on my personal turmoil. That fragile peace shattered when I strode into the staff lounge one morning to find Celine perched on the battered couch, sipping coffee from a world's best teacher mug like she owned the place. Well, if it isn't my favorite cousin, she purred, eyeing me over the rim of her mug. Long time no see. I gritted my teeth, clutching my lesson plan so tightly the edges crumpled. What are you doing here, Celine? Working, of course. She batted her lashes innocently. Didn't you hear? I'm spearheading a new after-school community program. Of course she was. Celine always had to slither her way into anything good, tainting it with her poisonous presence. At an elementary school? Forgive me if I have a hard time picturing you embracing your charitable side. Celine tsked, setting her mug aside as she rose with feline grace. Still so cynical, Lena, and here I thought teaching would have instilled you with a more nurturing nature. She moved closer until we were toe-to-toe, her sickly sweet perfume overwhelming my senses. You see, this program will provide after-school tutoring, mentoring, all sorts of enrichment activities. A worthwhile pursuit, no? My mind raced, putting together the pieces. You're going after the grant for underprivileged students, the one funding our science fair, trying to sabotage my work, again. Laughing lightly, Celine trailed a fingertip down my arm, making my skin crawl. Always so suspicious, cousin. Can it be possible that we simply had the same idea? I jerked backward out of her reach. We both know that's not true. You're threatened by anything that might make me happy or successful. Celine's perfectly shaped brows arched in mock offense. My, what a negative perception you have of me, and after everything we've been through together. Memories of our ruined friendship, years of betrayal and emotional manipulation flashed through my mind in rapid succession, like pretending to be my friend while secretly undermining me at every turn. I shook my head vehemently. I'm not falling for your games anymore, Celine. The gloves are off. Is that so? She leaned in until I could make out the flecks of gold in her hazel eyes. Well, in that case, game on, dear cousin. May the best woman win. With a wink, Celine sauntered away, hips swaying provocatively. I stared after her, my fists clenched at my sides, jaw ticking. She thought she could walk all over me, using her usual manipulative tactics to steal my happiness, my success, my very livelihood. But not this time. This time I would be ready for her. This time I would fight back with everything I had. Because if Celine thought for 1 second that I would go down without a battle royale, she was sorely mistaken. After her betrayal with Jonah, I had nothing left to lose, and Celine was about to learn just how determined a woman could be when she had vengeance driving her every move. After my confrontation with Celine at school, I knew I needed to take serious action to undermine her campaign before it gained traction. But I barely had time to strategize, with science fair preparations and dealing with her constant needling about the grant proposal. That's when Alex Taylor darkened my doorstep one crisp October evening. I furrowed my brow at the unfamiliar face as I pulled open the door. "Can I help you, Lena Morgan?" The man gave me a tight smile, eyes rimmed by purplish half-moons. "I'm Alex, Celine's ex-fiancée." My eyebrows shot up. I'd had no idea Selene was that serious with anyone, let alone engaged. Though it made sense, she was the queen of putting on airs, playing the role of blushing bride-to-be. "I don't understand. What are you doing here?" "I came to offer my condolences," he said gruffly, "and maybe get a little—" He paused, mouth twisting wryly. "Vengeance." I stared at him blankly for a beat before stepping aside to usher him in. He brushed past me, already making himself at home on my sofa. "I'm sorry, I'm still confused. Are you saying you want revenge on Celine? Your ex?" "Ex is putting it mildly," Alex snorted derisively. "More like the vengeful succubus who drained me of every last penny I had before discarding me like trash." The pain etched in the lines of his face was achingly familiar. I settled in the armchair across from him, sympathy stirring. "I think I can relate," I murmured. "She has a way of completely destroying people, doesn't she?" Alex's jaw tightened as he nodded. "You know, for months I suspected she was being unfaithful, overstepping boundaries with strange men. It wasn't until her latest twisted scheme that I caught her red-handed." Red-hot rage simmered just beneath the surface of his voice. "That's when Celine finally confessed her dalliance with some nobody named Jonah. Left me at the altar to go slithering into his bed." My heart seized at the mention of Jonah's name, the wound still agonizingly fresh. Of course he would be Celine's ultimate prize. She couldn't resist taking the man I loved most in the cruelest way possible. "So she played you both," I said quietly. "Manipulated your lives, your emotions, all for her own selfish gain. She's a first-rate psychopath." Alex pinned me with a hard stare. "Which is why I came to you. You're not the only one she's burned, Lena. And if we team up, maybe we can finally make that snake pay for her misdeeds." I searched his face, seeing the echoes of my own pain and frustration mirrored back at me. Joining forces. It wasn't something I'd considered before in my quest for retribution. But having an ally with intimate knowledge of Celine's depravity, her Achilles heel, that could be invaluable ammunition. My lips curved into a slow smile. "You're right, Alex. She has ruined far too many lives through her lies and treachery." I leaned forward, holding his gaze steadily. "So what did you have in mind?" Justice and vengeance were a deadly combination, and with her ex in my arsenal, I was about to become an unstoppable force. "Watch out, Celine. This time, you knocked on the wrong door." Over the next few weeks, Alex and I fell into an easy camaraderie as we plotted our campaign against Celine. Having an insider's perspective into her psyche and past manipulations proved invaluable. "You know, she nearly bankrupted an entire charity I was on the board of?" Alex shook his head in disgust one night over takeout containers littering my coffee table. Somehow she managed to siphon funds into her own accounts, all while acting as the face of the organization. "I'm not surprised," I muttered, popping a leftover egg roll in my mouth. Celine has always loved being the center of attention, playing the hero, as long as it benefited her in the end. Alex nodded grimly. By the time we realized what she'd done, it was too late to recover most of the money. The charity folded within months, his fists clenched on the tabletop. All those people who donated in good faith, all those lives we could have helped, it makes me sick just thinking about it. Reaching across, I placed my hand over his in a comforting gesture. "I'm so sorry, Alex. I had no idea she could be that monstrous." He let out a harsh exhale, some of the tension easing from his shoulders. "You're one of the few who's seen her true colors, Lena, the reality behind that sugary sweet facade." I couldn't help but snort at that. Oh, I've had a front row seat to her greatest hits over the years, believe me, like the time she stole my boyfriend all through junior year, just because she knew I liked him. Alex arched an eyebrow. This was a pattern for her? Using guys to get what she wants from her friends and family? Among other things. I waved a hand dismissively. Don't get me started on the time she sabotaged performances, bad-mouthed me to teachers, the vicious pranks and rumors. A heavy silence fell between us as I trailed off, remembering the dark spiral of those teenage years. How utterly alone and beaten down I'd felt, like I was losing my grip on reality with Celine's relentless torment. Until one day, something inside me had simply snapped. After that, I shut her out completely, eschewing her manipulative games and focusing on salvaging what self-worth I had left. I blinked, shoving those memories aside as Alex watched me intently. The point is, Celine's depravity knows no bounds. She's a cancerous presence, leeching off those around her until they have nothing left to give. Except this time, we're putting a stop to it. His voice was low and resolute. This time, that vengeful harpy will be the one left with nothing when we're through with her. I held his gaze, my chest swelling with righteous determination. You're damn right. She's about to learn that karma can be one cruel mistress. Celine thought she could slither her way through life, preying on innocent victims without consequence. But she was about to face the ultimate punishment, having her own wicked deeds thrown back in her face for all to see. And Alex and I would be the ones to administer that deliciously brutal justice. My cousin's reign of terror was about to come to a permanent, humiliating end. After all, nobody duped Lena Morgan and got away with it, not even family. Over the next few months, Alex and I worked tirelessly to gather ammunition against Celine. Bank statements, recordings, eyewitness accounts, we left no stone unturned in exposing her trail of deception. Finally, we had enough evidence to bury her. All that was left was to decide how to detonate the bomb. This has to be a spectacle, Alex insisted one evening as we pored over our extensive files on Celine. A public reckoning where she can't slither away or spin her usual lies. I nodded slowly, an idea taking shape. You're right. We need to hit her where it hurts, her reputation, her fragile ego, her desire to be admired. In a flash of inspiration, I remembered the community outreach program Celine was coordinating at my school, the one that directly threatened funding for my science fair. I've got it, I said, a slow smile spreading. We hijack her precious community event, take it over and reveal every sordid detail of her con artistry in front of her elite donors and would-be admirers. A feral grin split Alex's face. Now that's the kind of vengeance I'm talking about. Rip away the facade so they can see her for the viper she truly is. Over the next few weeks, we began coordinating an elaborate sting operation, complete with a multimedia presentation and eyewitness speakers to validate our claims. Alex's forceful charisma and my insider access to the event made us a formidable team. Still, as the day drew nearer, tendrils of doubt began creeping in. What if Celine managed to slither her way out of this too? What if our efforts only bruised her ego briefly before she inevitably regained control? I shoved those thoughts aside. This was my one chance to take her down for good, to stop the cycle of torment once and for all. There would be no going back. The night before the event, I tossed and turned, alternating between anxiety and bristling anticipation. When I finally surrendered to fitful slumber, my dreams were plagued with haunting images of Celine's past cruelties. I awoke just before dawn in a cold sweat, my heart thundering against my ribcage. It's time to end this once and for all. Later that morning, I strode into the convention center with my head held high, Alex at my side carrying the hard drive containing the evidence. We settled into our seats near the front, watching through narrowed eyes as the space filled with members of the community. Right on schedule, Celine swept in like a conquering hero, basking in the adulation as she took her place on the stage, smiling that brilliant, insincere smile of hers as the audience applauded. For a moment, a flicker of doubt gnawed at me. This woman had tormented me for decades, always staying one step ahead, dodging each attempt I made to take her down. What made me think this time would be any different? Then I caught her gaze raking the audience, that predatory hunger in her eyes, and my resolve solidified like steel. This is it. No more excuses, no more running. Time to pay the piper, cousin. Beside me, Alex must have sensed my shift, giving me the slightest nod of encouragement. As Celine launched into her opening remarks, I stood abruptly and strode down the aisle toward the stage, each step fueled by a potent mix of anger, fear, but most of all, vindication. This time, she was the one about to get played, and I couldn't wait to watch her entire world unravel. Celine's mouth fell open in stunned outrage as I snatched the microphone from her perfectly manicured grip. Good morning, everyone. I said, amazed by the steady timbre of my voice. I'm afraid there's been a bit of a change in programming today. Murmurs rippled through the audience as I turned to face them fully. My name is Lena Morgan, and I have some deeply disturbing information to share about the woman you've all come to celebrate. Celine recovered quickly, that too bright smile stretching her lips as she moved to take back the mic. Why, cousin, whatever are you going on about? Surely you're not still upset over that little misunderstanding with Jonah. This has nothing to do with Jonah, I cut her off sharply, though I'll be sure to fill him in on the lurid details later. From the front row, Alex sprang into action, firing up the multimedia presentation we'd spent weeks meticulously curating, bank statements, audio recordings, testimonies from Celine's past victims. A vivid portrait of greed, duplicity, and sociopathic behavior. As the first damning piece of evidence flashed across the screens, a stunned hush fell over the room. I could taste the disbelief, the palpable sense that these upstanding community members were having the veil ripped away from their eyes. Including Jonah, who sat frozen beside me, his expression shifting from confusion to horror as each new monstrous transgression was revealed. No, Celine, tell me this isn't true, he rasped out, face ashen. Please, baby, I need to hear your side. But Celine seemed to have been rendered momentarily mute, her eyes wild and desperate as they ping-ponged between the screens and her dwindling audience. I watched the smug veneer cracking in real time, reveling in the glorious destruction. The evidence speaks for itself, I'm afraid. This is the real Celine Reynolds, a pathological liar and con artist who walks through life taking everything she can get her claws into. Finally, snapping out of her trance, Celine turned murderous eyes on me. How dare you? She seethed, manicured nails digging into her palms. You've always been jealous of me, Lena, trying to sabotage everything I've worked for with your sad, empty life. A bitter laugh burst from my lips. Are you kidding me right now? I'm the one with the sad life? I shook my head, suddenly numb to the scrutiny of the dwindling crowd. All I could focus on was the wretched woman crumbling before me like a house of cards. For years you belittled me, stole from me, stomped on my dreams and relationships, all because your pathetic ego couldn't stand me having any shred of happiness. My voice dripped with years of built-up venom. Well, no more, Celine. I'm done being your punching bag. Stalking forward, I threw every ounce of my anger and disgust into my parting jab. From this moment on, you'll be just another washed-up, disgraced nobody, alone and empty, with nothing but your greed and jealousy to keep you company. For a long, delicious moment, Celine and I stared each other down, twin infernos of rage and anguish blazing in our eyes. Then she was scrambling off the stage in a flurry of tears and screeching protests as the convention center erupted into pandemonium. I stood frozen center stage, the cyclone of chaos swirling around me as Jonah and Alex, then others, rushed up to comfort or confront me. But their voices were muffled, drowned out by the deafening thrum of victory pounding through my veins. After over a decade of torment at Celine's hands, she had finally received her comeuppance. And as the last embers of her reputation went up in flames all around me, I savored the blissful sense of release. A heavy burden had been lifted. The mental shackles that had bound me to her toxicity for so long were at last obliterated, leaving me lighter than I'd felt in years. My war with Celine was over, and I, Lena Morgan, had emerged the undisputed victor. The fallout from the community center showdown was swift and brutal. Within days, Celine's sordid history had made headlines across the city. Corporate sponsors dropped her program like a scorching stone. The very people who had fawned over her were now turning their backs in droves, sickened by her deceit. As for me, I reveled in every salacious detail, reading each new expose with a mixture of vindication and pity for my shattered cousin. While part of me felt a twinge of remorse for dismantling her so thoroughly, the larger part simply basked in the euphoria of being free from her toxic stranglehold. Jonah tried, unsuccessfully, to convince me he'd been an unwitting victim of Celine's manipulations, as if that absolved him of his own culpability in devastating me. "I'm so sorry, Lena," he pleaded during one of his endless voicemails. "I never meant to hurt you like this. You have to know that, deep down. Celine, she's a master at deception, twisting things to suit her needs." I snorted at the familiar litany of excuses, easily deleting the message. If Jonah thought a few puppy dog apologies could erase the gut-wrenching betrayal of his actions, he had another thing coming. I was well and truly done with him. The only person who seemed to fully understand my newfound sense of peace was Alex. My unlikely ally had become an irreplaceable part of my life through the hellish months we spent plotting downfall. Feels good to breathe freely again, doesn't it? He grinned over glasses of celebratory wine one evening. Like 1,000-pound weight has finally been lifted. I clinked my glass to his with a satisfied smile. Something like that. I honestly didn't realize how much of my life was shackled by that woman until I detached myself from her venom. Leaning back on the couch, I felt the tension bleed from my shoulders, an unfamiliar but welcome sensation. I spent so many years terrified of her, jumping at every shadow, always wondering when the next attack would come. I shook my head slowly. But now, that hold is shattered. She has zero power over me. To moving on from toxic influences, Alex raised his glass in a salute. May we never look back. Here. As the weeks passed, that cathartic energy fueled me with a renewed sense of self-worth and purpose. I refocused my efforts at school, investing every ounce of passion into my students' projects and the upcoming science fair. The first time one of my kids won a grant for their legitimately brilliant proposal, pride swelled in my chest. This was what I was meant for, nurturing young minds and helping them spread their wings, uninhibited by the toxic cloud of jealousy and deception I'd lived under for so long. At the ceremony, Aunt Mara swept me into her arms, tears shining in her eyes. "Oh, Lena, I'm so proud of you," she whispered fiercely. "The strength and resilience you've shown." She pulled back, cupping my face tenderly. "Your parents would have been in awe of the woman you've become, leaving that poisonous influence behind for good." I blinked back my own tears as her words washed over me. Perhaps for the first time, I truly appreciated the journey that had led me to this point. Every anguished step had built fortitude, sharpened my spirit, reminded me of who I was and who I wanted to be. As I stood on that stage, clutching my award with students cheering me on, I felt something shift fundamentally inside. A lingering shroud lifted, allowing the light to flood in at last. Celine no longer haunted me, her shadow permanently banished by the brilliant future shining ahead. I had been to the darkest depths and clawed my way into the blazing truth. Nothing and nobody would dim my spirit again. I stared at the ornate mahogany casket, my eyes blurred by a constant stream of tears. The sea of mourners had long since departed, leaving me alone to say my final goodbye to Dad. The suffocating silence was shattered by Derek's voice. "So, how much are we getting from your old man?" I whipped around, eyes wide with disbelief. "What? His estate?" Derek pressed, no trace of sympathy in his tone. "The inheritance? How much will it be?" A lump formed in my throat as the weight of his callous words hit me. This was the man I'd married, the one who'd professed his undying love and support just months ago. Yet here he stood, mere hours after we'd laid Dad to rest, fixated solely on potential financial gain. I don't know the details," I stammered, still reeling from the emotional whiplash. Derek scoffed. "Well, you better find out. Your old man was loaded. We're entitled to our cut." Anger flared within me, a fire ignited by the stark contrast between the man before me and the one I thought I'd married. "My father just died, Derek? Show some respect." His eyes narrowed. "Don't get all sanctimonious on me. This is the real world, babe. Money talks." I opened my mouth to retort, but the words died on my lips. In that moment, it was as if the veil had been lifted, revealing the true nature of the man I'd vowed to spend my life with. The man whose ambition and greed clearly outweighed any love for me. Choking back tears, I stormed out of the room, Derek's voice trailing behind me. "We're not going to struggle like your parents did, Marlene. You hear me? This is our chance." His words echoed through the cavernous halls of the funeral home, a cruel reminder that the life I thought we had was nothing but an illusion. I couldn't shake the feeling of disillusionment as memories from happier times resurfaced, taunting me with the facade Derek had so expertly constructed. Our early years played like an idyllic montage, his hand gently resting on the small of my back as we strolled through the park, his warm smile as we dined by candlelight, his infectious laughter echoing through our modest apartment. In those days, money held little importance for us. Derek was content working as a high school English teacher, believing that impacting young minds was the noblest of callings. I poured my heart into the local nonprofit, inspired by Dad's philanthropic spirit. We lived simply, but our bond was rich with understanding and shared purpose. Perhaps that's what made Derek's descent into greed so insidious. The shift was gradual, like a malignant growth festering unnoticed. At first, the changes were subtle, a newfound fixation on designer labels, an inexplicable disdain for his once beloved profession, trivial indulgences that I naively overlooked, blinded by the idealistic notion that the man I loved remained unchanged at his core. Our first major clash came when Derek abruptly resigned from teaching without discussing it with me first. "This job is beneath me," he scoffed, tossing his school ID onto the kitchen counter. "I'm destined for greater things." I stared at him, bewildered. "But you always said teaching was your calling. What's going on, Derek?" He waved a dismissive hand. "I've outgrown that mindset, babe. It's time to aim higher, starting with finding a career worthy of my talents." In the days that followed, Derek's disdain for frugality became apparent. Date nights transformed into reservations at opulent restaurants where the wine list cost more than my monthly salary. Weekends once spent hiking or visiting museums gave way to conspicuous shopping excursions, our humble abode rapidly filling with designer furnishings and ostentatious art pieces. "You deserve the finer things in life," he'd insist whenever I questioned the extravagance, his words laced with a strange undercurrent of resentment. My pleas for restraint and open dialogue fell on deaf ears. Derek had been consumed by an insatiable hunger, one that steadily drove a wedge between us. The man I'd married, the one who found joy in simplicity and connection, was slipping further away with each materialistic indulgence. Derek's fixation with wealth and status only intensified as the months ticked by. Our once peaceful home became a battleground, with heated arguments erupting over his reckless spending habits. "This Rolex cost more than my entire year's salary," I shouted, waving the ostentatious timepiece in his face. "We can't afford these kinds of luxuries, Derek," he scoffed, snatching the watch back. "Don't be so provincial, Marlene. This is the lifestyle we deserve, the one your rich daddy enjoyed while looking down his nose at the rest of us." The bitterness in his tone struck me like a physical blow. "My father worked hard for everything he built," I shot back, fighting the sting of tears, "and he never flaunted his wealth like some arrogant buffoon." Derek's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Well, now it's my turn. Our turn. We're not living like paupers anymore." Desperate to make him see reason, I tried a different tack. "Don't you remember how happy we were when money wasn't a priority? We had everything we needed, each other, fulfilling work, a warm home." "Had being the operative word," he sneered. "I'm not settling for your hippie ideals and second-hand dregs anymore. Either get on board or get out of my way." The venom in his words left me reeling. This angry, materialistic stranger had fully consumed the man I once knew and loved. In the days that followed, the disintegration of our marriage accelerated at a dizzying pace. Derek grew more distant, his routine now centered around glad-handing with the city's elite and ingratiating himself with wealthy social circles. If I dared broach the subject of his wasteful spending, he'd brush me off with thinly veiled contempt. "Don't worry your pretty little head about finances, dear," he purred in that mocking tone. "Just leave it to me." It wasn't until Elena, my closest friend, pulled me aside one afternoon that I began to see the full extent of Derek's betrayal. "Marlene, I have to tell you something," she said uneasily, her warm brown eyes filled with pity. Lowering her voice, she continued, "I saw Derek having lunch with some woman last week, at that new high-end bistro downtown." My heart plummeted. "What? Are you sure?" Elena nodded solemnly. "Honey, I'm so sorry. From the way they were interacting, it seemed like more than just a business meeting." Bile rose in my throat as her implication washed over me. Of course, in his endless pursuit of wealth and status, Derek's indifference towards me had given way to outright infidelity. The once solid foundation of our marriage had crumbled, reduced to rubble by his greed and wandering eye. Choking back tears, I met Elena's mournful gaze and forced out the words that had been weighing on me for far too long. I think I need to leave him." Despite my newfound resolve to leave Derek, extricating myself from the marriage proved easier said than done. Not only did his deceit and greed continue unabated, but his professional life began spiraling out of control as well. It started with the little things. Arriving home progressively later from work, absently scrolling through his phone during what few conversations we still had. When I finally mustered the courage to confront him, his excuse was always the same. Just trying to get ahead at the firm, babe. You know how it is. Except I didn't know. The Derek I'd married had loved his job teaching high school English, finding genuine fulfillment in fostering young minds. This obsessive, workaholic behavior was yet another glaring red flag that the man I vowed to spend my life with was long gone. The cracks in his professional facade became increasingly apparent over the following weeks. Meetings with supervisors held behind closed doors, urgent hushed phone calls, the vacant stare that often clouded his eyes, all signs that his career was hanging by a thread. One evening I returned home from the nonprofit to find Derek slumped on the couch, disheveled and reeking of stale liquor. "You're home early," he slurred, not bothering to lift his head from where it lolled against the armrest. I bristled at his flippant tone. "Derek, what's going on? You're worrying me." With a grunt, he hauled himself into a sitting position and fixed me with a bleary glare. "What's going on is that I'm about to lose my job because the bigwigs don't appreciate my innovative strategies." He sneered the last words, making air quotes with his fingers. My brow furrowed. This was the first mention of any workplace issues. "Why didn't you tell me? We could have discussed it, tried to." "Discussing it isn't going to save my career," he snapped, cutting me off. "Those elitist pencil pushers have had it out for me from day one. They're just intimidated by my potential." I opened my mouth, but he barreled onwards, working himself into an irate frenzy. "Well, screw them. I don't need their pathetic six-figure gig. There are way bigger opportunities on the horizon, opportunities that'll make their bourgeois little heads spin." Unsure how to respond, I could only stare in stunned silence as Derek ranted and raved about corporate conspiracies and his bright future. His words may have been fueled by the hazy indignation of alcohol, but they hinted at the wounded pride and bitter resentment steadily poisoning his psyche. In that moment, it became clear. The stable career and comfortable life we'd built together no longer captivated Derek's ambitions. Our once modest dreams had been supplanted by a ravenous hunger for status, power, and wealth. Lots of wealth. The next afternoon, Elena called with another bombshell that obliterated any remaining illusions about my husband's integrity. "Marlene, you're not going to like this," she began uneasily. "But I saw Derek meeting with some woman again yesterday, at that park near downtown." My grip tightened on the phone as realization settled in like a leaden weight. "Let me guess. Not the kind of meeting you'd expect between coworkers?" There was a weighted pause before Elena exhaled slowly. "No, honey, definitely not." All at once, the pieces began clicking into place. Derek's frequent late nights, his newfound obsession with wealth and status, his indifference towards me, it all stemmed from another woman. Another life he was building, one untethered from the marriage vows he'd so carelessly discarded. My next words came out in a choked whisper. "He's been cheating on me, hasn't he?" Elena's pained silence was confirmation enough. In that moment, the floodgates shattered, a torrent of rage and betrayal crashing over me as I realized the true depths of my husband's selfish depravity. Through my sobs, I managed to choke out one final question. Does she have money?" Elena's response cleaved what little remained of my heart in two. "Yeah. From what I overheard, she's loaded." After Elena's revelation, a numb disbelief enveloped me for days. Part of me still clung to the desperate hope that Derek's indiscretions were just a momentary lapse, that the man I loved was still in there somewhere, buried beneath the avarice and betrayal. That flicker of naive optimism was extinguished one frigid evening when the evidence of his unfaithfulness slapped me squarely across the face. I had returned home late from a charity fundraiser, my body and spirit drained from putting on a brave face all night. Padding into the kitchen, I was surprised to find the lights on and Derek's laptop open on the counter. At first, I dismissed it as him simply forgetting to log off before leaving for wherever it was he disappeared to these days. But as I drew closer, something on the screen caught my eye, an unmistakable charge from a high-end jewelry boutique. My heart stuttered as I clicked to scrutinize the charge further. There it was in glaring digital font, a receipt for a diamond tennis bracelet totaling nearly $10,000. Ice flooded my veins as the sick realization dawned on me. This was no treat for his devoted wife. This was an extravagant gift, purchased with funds from our joint savings account, the one meant for our future and security. The one Derek had been steadily draining to bankroll his tawdry affair. White-hot anger lanced through me, mouth going dry as I heard the telltale jingle of keys at the front door. Derek sauntered in a moment later, seeming not to notice me at first. It wasn't until I cleared my throat loudly that his gaze snapped over, eyes widening fractionally. "Oh, hey, babe. Didn't expect you home so. Who is she?" I cut him off, jaw clenched. He blinked dumbly. "Who's who?" "Don't play dumb," I snapped, snatching up the laptop and shoving the incriminating receipt in his face. "Who's the woman you've been spending our savings on?" Understanding dawned across Derek's features, swiftly morphing into a sneer. "So what if I got somebody a little gift? I've more than earned the right to spend my money how I see fit." My hand reflexively flew to my stinging cheek before I even registered the crack of his backhand. "Don't you dare talk down to me," he snarled, eyes glittering with contempt. "If it weren't for me, you'd still be a washed-up nobody slumming with the paupers." Shock and pain paralyzed me as Derek unleashed the full torrent of his vitriol. "Let's be honest here, Marlene. Our marriage was a mutually beneficial arrangement, nothing more. I played the doting husband while you dangled the carrot of your old man's fortune in front of me. Well, I'm sick of chasing scraps." He grabbed a fistful of my hair, wrenching my head back so our faces were inches apart. The acrid reek of bourbon and expensive cologne assailed my senses. "It's time you held up your end of the bargain. I want access to that trust fund, all of it. Because let's face facts. I'm the only adult in this relationship, the one with actual ambition and drive. Without me, you'd still be a pathetic little charity case living off Daddy's scraps." His words lacerated my soul, finally obliterating any remnants of the honorable man I thought I'd married. This cruel, domineering monster was the true Derek Hollister. A black-hearted conman who had masterfully played me for a fool using the oldest trick in the book. He released me with a disdainful shove, letting my body crumple limply to the floor as he stalked off, already dialing his phone. "Hey, baby, it's me," he purred. "Clear your evening. Daddy's about to come into some money." I kept my head bowed as Derek stormed back into the kitchen, his expensive loafers clicking menacingly on the tile. A tremor ran through me, every instinct screaming at me to flee, but I remained rooted to the spot, bracing myself for the inevitable confrontation. "Well," he sneered, grabbing a fistful of my hair and yanking my head back. "I'm waiting for an explanation, you ungrateful little—" "There is no inheritance," I interrupted, the words tumbling out in a breathless rush. "Not for you, at least." Derek's face contorted in an incredulous sneer. "What the hell are you talking about?" Steeling myself, I met his gaze unflinchingly. My father's assets and holdings were all locked into an irrevocable trust after his death. Yeah, in order for either of us to access a single cent, we both have to agree. Comprehension sank in, quickly followed by disbelief. You're lying." "I'm not," I stated it simply, matter-of-factly. Those were the conditions he stipulated, a final test to judge the character of the person I chose as a husband. Derek opened his mouth, but I pressed on, determined to unleash the torrent of pent-up emotion that had been simmering all these years. "He knew, Derek. My father saw through your facade from the beginning. He recognized you for the materialistic, self-serving leech that you are." The words spilled forth like shrapnel, each one laced with a lifetime's worth of anger and disgust. "I was just a means to an end for you. A convenient pathway to the fortune you thought was your birthright. Well, let me enlighten you." My voice dropped to a seething hiss. "The only birthright you'll ever receive is a parade of sleepless nights, wondering how you could have been so blind to sacrifice everything for greed." A vein pulsed visibly in Derek's forehead as I issued the killing blow. "This marriage is over. Consider the settlement from my personal savings your reward for playing the part so convincingly. It's more than you deserve, but at least now you won't drag anyone else down with your pathetic existence." The resounding slap echoed through the cavernous kitchen like a gunshot. My head whipped to the side from the force of the blow, the sharp sting blossoming across my cheek as I crumpled to the floor. Derek towered over me, chest heaving with unbridled rage. You ungrateful, treacherous bitch, he roared, specks of spittle flying from his lips. After all I sacrificed for you? For US? With a feral snarl, he hauled me up by the collar of my blouse until our faces were mere inches apart. His next words dripped with venom. You'll be the one wondering, Marlene. Wondering how you'll survive without a single penny to your trust fund name. Because I'll make sure every friend, every business associate knows exactly how low you stooped to try and rip me off. He shoved me away, my back slamming against the counter as I fought to remain upright. This isn't over, not by a long shot. You hear me? Chest heaving, eyes wild with fury, Derek snatched up his coat and stormed towards the front door, pausing only to lob one final parting shot. Have fun with your precious charities, you pathetic do-gooder, because my dear, dear wife... That's all you'll have left when I'm through. The door slammed with deafening finality, leaving me huddled on the kitchen floor, cradling my throbbing face as the enormity of my situation washed over me. Derek's path of destruction was only just beginning, and whether I was prepared or not, I was squarely in the crosshairs. In the days following Derek's explosive departure, I found myself adrift, unmoored by the jarring reality that my life had become unrecognizable. The cozy home we'd built, the dreams we'd shared, all desecrated by one man's insatiable greed. My initial instinct was to withdraw, to lick my wounds and mourn the demise of my naively idealistic notions about love and partnership. But the more I dwelled on Derek's vicious threats, the more a simmering fury took root. He wanted to drag my name through the mud? To punish me for seeing through his charade? Well, two could play at that game. It started small at first. A carefully worded email to our property manager, ensuring Derek had no way to siphon further funds from our joint accounts. Another message to my assistant at the nonprofit, alerting her that I would need to take some personal time. Then came the bigger moves, executed with a calculated precision that would make even Derek's mercenary soul proud. First, I orchestrated a video call with Alina, filling her in on every lurid detail of Derek's betrayal and demanding she back my version of events, should he try any underhanded tactics. Her expression shifted from horror to grim resolution as I outlined my gambit. Next, I drafted the divorce papers, employing the shrewdest family law firm in the city to guarantee Derek received not a penny more than what I deemed fair restitution, a settlement payment of $200,000 from my personal trust, enough to ensure he could slink out of my life forever, but not so exorbitant that he could squander it indefinitely. Elena insisted on being present for the signing, watching with poorly concealed disdain as Derek scrawled his name with a trembling hand. "I hope you realize how lucky you are," she said, voice low and filled with quiet menace. "If it were up to me, you'd be leaving with nothing but the clothes on your back, you spineless gravy-trained." "Elena, it's done," I interjected firmly, as much for her benefit as to halt Derek's wounded sputtering. "He's gotten what he deserves. More than he deserves, even." The implication hung heavy in the air as the two of us stared him down, daring him to protest, to unload the inevitable torrent of vitriol I knew was simmering behind those smoldering eyes. But after an agonizing moment, Derek simply gathered up the papers and stormed towards the exit without a word. Just before disappearing through the door, he paused, turning to fix me with one final glower. "This won't be the last you hear from me, Marlene." It wasn't a threat, but a snarled promise, saturated with a bitterness so viscous it was nearly tangible. Then, like a noxious vapor dissipating in the breeze, he slipped out the door and was gone. It would be weeks before I heard from Derek again, the eerie silence only periodically shattered by news of him liquidating assets or reports of increasingly erratic public outbursts. A small, vindictive part of me relished every lurid detail, savoring his downward spiral into irrelevance. But I knew this temporary reprieve was precisely that, temporary. Sooner or later, Derek's rage and indignation would reach a crescendo, and when it did, I intended to be ready. Because while he'd been content to leech from others for sustenance, I was preparing to fight this battle the same way I'd built my entire life, through hard work, perseverance, and a steadfast refusal to let anyone or anything break me. Not even the man who had once sworn to cherish me, in sickness, health, and utter betrayal of every vow. The first whispers began trickling in a few weeks after Derek's unceremonious exit from my life. Snippets of information delivered by well-meaning friends and colleagues, each one more damning than the last. Did you hear Derek got fired from his job? Apparently he was skimming funds for personal use. I ran into Derek downtown the other day. He was drunk, ranting about you and your dad's money like a man possessed. Derek's been blacklisted by every law firm in the city after that courtroom outburst. He's become a total pariah. At first, I shrugged off the gossip as idle chatter, gossamer threads of hearsay that held no true weight or substance. But as the reports persisted, it became impossible to ignore the harsh reality. Derek's unraveling was veering rapidly into total meltdown territory. It all came to a head during a garden party hosted by Elena to celebrate the launch of her new art gallery. I had been mingling amiably with potential donors when the first piercing shatters of glass shattered the refined ambiance. A chorus of startled gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd as Derek stumbled into view, wild-eyed and swaying perilously. "There she is," he bellowed, words slurred and reeking of cheap liquor. "The ungrateful harpy who destroyed everything." Elena's security team immediately moved to intervene, but he shrugged them off with drunken bravado. "Don't try and silence me," Derek raged, spittle flying from his chapped lips. "Everyone here deserves to know what kind of shrew they're dealing with." My cheeks flushed crimson as every eye turned towards me. Clearing my throat, I addressed the owner of the gallery in measured tones. "Please accept my apologies for this disruption. I'll handle." "She played me for a fool, every single one of you," Derek interrupted, his tirade rapidly crescendoing into unhinged raving. "All for the sake of money. Her money." There were audible gasps and shocked whispers. I fixed Derek with a steely glare. "That's enough, Derek. You've embarrassed yourself enough for one evening." But he barreled onward, fueled by an endless wellspring of spite and injured pride. "After everything I sacrificed for our future, she tried to steal my inheritance. Can you believe the audacity?" The words barely registered before a harsh bark of laughter burst forth, unbidden. I couldn't contain the eruption of bitter mirth bubbling up inside me. "Your inheritance?" I echoed incredulously. "Derek, you arrogant, pathetic fool." His jaw went slack, belatedly recognizing the potent mixture of pity and revulsion simmering behind my gaze. "Don't you realize why this happened? Why you've ended up a disgraced, destitute laughingstock?" My voice dropped to a hush, yet carried clearly across the garden. "It's because you put your faith in money rather than the people who actually loved you. You traded ethics and integrity for greed, and now you have nothing. No wealth, no status, not even a shred of self-respect left." My denunciation hung heavy in the air, each word landing like a scathing slap. For one fleeting instant, Derek's bravado faltered. Then, like a rattlesnake rearing back, his expression contorted into one of pure, unhinged loathing. "This isn't over, Marlene," he snarled, fists clenching. "I'll make you regret ever." "Get him out of here," Elena interjected coolly, having materialized at my side with her security detail in tow. Within seconds, Derek was being forcibly hauled away, his drunken imprecations fading into the distance as he was deposited unceremoniously on the sidewalk outside. As tranquility gradually returned to the garden, I felt a gentle pressure on my arm. "Marlene, are you all right?" Elena asked softly, brow creased in concern. I offered her a wan smile and patted her hand reassuringly. "I'm fine. More than fine, really." My gaze drifted towards the path where Derek had been dragged, visualizing his once smug confidence withering beneath the harsh light of public shame and rejection. In that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of freedom and release. The demise of my treacherous ex-husband was nearly complete, and from the ashes of betrayal, a new, more resilient woman was emerging. The stench of lilies and the murmur of condolences fill the air as I stand beside Lydia's casket, my heart shattered into a million pieces. I never imagined I'd outlive my own child, but here I am, saying goodbye to my beautiful, talented daughter. Natalie, my eldest, stands across from me, her face a mask of composure. How can she be so calm when her sister lies lifeless before us? As the priest concludes the service, Natalie steps forward, a glint of metal catching my eye. She reaches into her pocket and pulls out a small flash drive, holding it over Lydia's casket. "I'm sorry, Lydia," she whispers, her voice devoid of emotion, "but I had to do it." With that, she drops the drive into the coffin, the clunk of metal against wood echoing through the silent chapel. Confusion and anger surge through me. What could Natalie possibly mean by that? What secrets does that flash drive hold? I can't bear the thought of my daughter's relationship being tainted by darkness, even in death. As the mourners file out of the chapel, I approach Natalie, my voice trembling. "What was that about, Natalie? What did you put in your sister's coffin?" She looks at me, her eyes cold and distant. "It's nothing, Mom, just a silly inside joke between Lydia and me. Don't worry about it." But I can't shake the feeling that there's more to this than Natalie lets on. The way she dropped that flash drive, the emptiness in her voice. It's unsettling. I excuse myself from the reception, my mind reeling. I need answers, and I need them now. I make my way to Lydia's studio, the place where she poured her heart and soul into her art. As I step inside, the familiar scent of paint and canvas envelops me, and memories of Lydia's laughter and creativity flood my mind. I rummage through her desk, searching for any clues that might shed light on the mystery of the flash drive. As I rifle through papers and sketchbooks, my hand brushes against a small, hidden compartment. With trembling fingers, I pry it open, revealing a letter addressed to me in Lydia's handwriting. "Dear Mom," it begins, "if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and Natalie has finally shown her true colors. There are things you need to know about my sister, things I've kept hidden for far too long." As I read on, my heart sinks with each revelation. Lydia's words paint a picture of jealousy, manipulation, and betrayal, with Natalie at the center of it all. The flash drive, it seems, holds the evidence of Natalie's misdeeds, the very secrets that may have led to Lydia's untimely death. I clutch the letter to my chest, tears streaming down my face. How could I have been so blind to the darkness lurking within my own family? I know now that I must confront Natalie and uncover the truth, no matter how painful it may be. I owe it to Lydia to bring her sister to justice, and to finally lay my beautiful daughter to rest. With a heavy heart and a determined spirit, I tuck the letter into my pocket and head back to the reception, ready to face the secrets that have torn my family apart. Lydia, my sweet girl, I promise I won't let your memory be tainted by your sister's actions. I will find the truth, and I will make things right, no matter the cost. As I drive home from Lydia's funeral, my mind drifts back to the day when the cracks in our family first began to show. It was a sunny afternoon, and we had gathered at Natalie's lavish house for a family dinner. Lydia had just opened her art studio, and I could see the pride and excitement in her eyes as she shared her plans with us. "I can't believe you're wasting your time with this art nonsense." Natalie scoffed, swirling her wine glass. "When are you going to grow up and get a real job, Lydia?" Lydia's smile faltered, but she held her ground. "This is my real job, Natalie. I'm an artist, and I'm good at what I do." Natalie let out a harsh laugh. "An artist? Please. You'll never make a living off your silly little paintings. You need to face reality and stop being such a dreamer." I could see the hurt in Lydia's eyes, but before I could intervene, Natalie leaned in, her voice dripping with condescension. "Listen, Lydia, I have a business proposition for you. I'm working on a big project, and I could use your help. It's a bit unconventional, but it'll pay well, better than your little art studio ever could." Lydia hesitated, and I could see the conflict in her eyes. She wanted to prove herself, to show Natalie that she could succeed on her own terms. But Natalie was persistent, and in the end, Lydia relented. "Fine," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll do it, but only because I need the money to keep my studio afloat." Natalie smiled, a cruel, triumphant smile that sent shivers down my spine. "Excellent. I knew you'd see things my way." As the memory fades, I feel a wave of guilt wash over me. I should have spoken up, should have defended Lydia and put a stop to Natalie's manipulation. But I remained silent, hoping that my daughters would work things out on their own. Now, as I sit in Lydia's studio, surrounded by the evidence of Natalie's betrayal, I know that my silence was a mistake. Lydia's journal entries reveal the depths of Natalie's jealousy and the lengths she went to sabotage her sister's career. The emails and photos on the flash drive expose Natalie's involvement in illegal activities, the very scheme she coerced Lydia into joining. I can't help but wonder if things would have been different if I had intervened sooner, if I had stood up to Natalie and protected Lydia from her sister's malice. But I can't change the past. All I can do now is fight for justice, to make sure that Natalie pays for what she's done. With a heavy heart, I gather the evidence and head to the police station. I recount Lydia's struggles and Natalie's manipulations, watching as the detectives' faces grow grim with each revelation. They assure me that they will investigate thoroughly, that they will leave no stone unturned in their quest for the truth. As I leave the station, I feel a glimmer of hope amidst the darkness. Lydia may be gone, but her memory lives on, and I will do everything in my power to ensure that her story is told. I will expose Natalie's crimes and bring her to justice, no matter the cost. For Lydia, for the daughter I lost, I will fight. I will be the voice she can no longer raise, the strength she can no longer muster. I will make things right, even if it means tearing our family apart. Natalie may have shattered our lives, but I will pick up the pieces and rebuild, one painful step at a time. The call comes in the middle of the night, jolting me from a restless sleep. It's the police, and the news they bring is like a punch to the gut. Lydia, my beautiful, vibrant daughter, is dead. An overdose, they say, but something in the detective's voice tells me there's more to the story. I can barely process the information as I stumble through the motions of planning Lydia's funeral. The grief is overwhelming, but it's the questions that keep me up at night. How did Lydia, who had always been so full of life, fall victim to drugs? And why, even in death, does Natalie seem so unnervingly calm? I try to push my suspicions aside, but they gnaw at me, refusing to be silenced. It's not until the funeral, when Natalie throws that flash drive into Lydia's coffin, that I know I can no longer ignore the truth. There's something sinister at play, and I'm determined to uncover it. As soon as the service ends, I corner Natalie, my voice shaking with a mixture of grief and anger. "What was on that flash drive, Natalie? What are you hiding?" Natalie's eyes narrow, her lips curling into a sneer. "You just can't let it go, can you, Mother? Always sticking your nose where it doesn't belong." "Lydia is dead," I snap, my hands balling into fists. "And you're acting like it's just another day at the office. What did you do, Natalie? What did you do to your sister?" For a moment, Natalie's mask slips, and I catch a glimpse of the darkness lurking beneath. "Lydia got what she deserved," she hisses, her voice dripping with venom. "She was weak, pathetic. She never had what it takes to succeed in this world. Not like me." I reel back, stunned by the callousness of her words. "How can you say that? She was your sister, Natalie. She loved you." Natalie scoffs, rolling her eyes. "Love? What good is love in this world, Mother? Power, control, that's what matters. And Lydia? She was nothing more than a pawn in my game." The pieces start to fall into place, and a wave of nausea washes over me. "The scheme," I whisper, my voice trembling. "The one you forced her into. That's what this is about, isn't it?" Natalie's smile is cruel, triumphant. Poor, naive Lydia. She was so desperate to prove herself, to show that she could make it on her own. It was almost too easy to manipulate her, to make her dance to my tune. Rage boils up inside me, and I lunge forward, my hands reaching for Natalie's throat. But she's too quick, sidestepping my attack with a mocking laugh. "Careful, Mother," she taunts, wagging her finger. "You wouldn't want to do anything you'll regret." I'm shaking, tears streaming down my face as I glare at the monster I once called my daughter. "This isn't over, Natalie," I spit, my voice raw with emotion. "I will find out what you did, and I will make you pay." I swear it on Lydia's grave. Natalie's eyes glitter with malice, her smile sharp as a knife. "Good luck with that, Mother. You have no idea who you're dealing with." With that, she turns on her heel and stalks away, leaving me alone in the empty church, my heart shattered beyond repair. But even as the grief threatens to consume me, I feel a flicker of determination spark to life in my chest. Natalie may think she's untouchable, but she's underestimated the power of a mother's love. I will uncover the truth, no matter the cost. I will expose Natalie's crimes and bring her to justice. For Lydia, for the daughter I lost, I will fight, and I will not rest until the truth is revealed, and Natalie pays for what she's done. The contents of the flash drive are worse than I could have ever imagined. Emails, photos, and documents paint a picture of deceit and betrayal so vile, it makes my stomach churn. Natalie, my own daughter, orchestrated a web of lies and manipulation that led to Lydia's downfall. I pore over Lydia's journal entries, each word a knife to my heart. She writes of Natalie's constant belittling, the way she made her feel small and worthless. But it's the entries about the scheme that break me. Lydia's words are filled with desperation, a frantic need to prove herself to Natalie. She talks about the pressure Natalie put on her, the way she convinced her that this was her only chance to make something of herself. And then the devastating realization that it was all a lie. The scheme was a fraud, a way for Natalie to line her own pockets at the expense of her sister's dreams. Lydia's entries become more and more frantic as she realizes the depth of Natalie's betrayal. She's in too deep, and she doesn't know how to get out. I can barely see through my tears as I read the final entry, dated just days before Lydia's death. "I can't do this anymore," she writes, her handwriting shaky and uneven. "Natalie has ruined everything. She's taken my dreams, my future, and now she's taking my life. I don't know how to escape this hell she's created for me." Anger burns through my veins, white-hot and all-consuming. How could Natalie do this to her own sister? How could she be so cruel, so heartless? I know I can't let this stand. I have to make Natalie pay for what she's done, but I also know I can't do it alone. With shaking hands, I gather the evidence and head to the police station. I tell them everything, from the moment Natalie first approached Lydia with the scheme to the final, devastating entry in her journal. The detectives listen intently, their faces growing grimmer with each revelation. They ask me questions, probing for more details, and I answer as best I can. It's painful, reliving every moment of Lydia's suffering, but I know I have to do it, for her. When I'm finished, the lead detective leans back in his chair, his eyes hard and determined. "We'll investigate this thoroughly, Mrs. Novak," he promises. "If what you're saying is true, your daughter Natalie will face serious consequences." I nod, feeling a flicker of hope amidst the darkness. "There's one more thing," I say, my voice trembling. "I think Natalie may have had something to do with Lydia's death. The timing, the circumstances, it's too coincidental." The detective's eyebrows shoot up, and he leans forward, his voice urgent. "What makes you say that?" I take a deep breath, steeling myself. Lydia's journal. She wrote about Natalie, supplying her with drugs. I think she may have given her the dose that killed her. The detective's face hardens, and he nods grimly. "We'll look into it, Mrs. Novak. I promise you, we'll get to the bottom of this." As I leave the station, I feel a weight lift from my shoulders. I know the road ahead will be long and painful, but I also know I'm not alone. The truth is on my side, and I will stop at nothing to see justice served. Natalie may have shattered our family, but she underestimated the power of a mother's love. I will fight for Lydia, for the life she should have had, and I will not rest until Natalie pays for her sins. The evidence weighs heavy in my hands as I walk into the police station, a sense of purpose driving my every step. The detectives greet me with grim faces, their eyes filled with a mix of sympathy and determination. They know the gravity of what I'm about to share. I lay out the emails, photos, and journal entries, watching as their expressions shift from shock to disgust. They pore over the documents, piecing together the puzzle of Natalie's deceit. With each new revelation, their resolve grows stronger. Detective Becker, the lead investigator, looks up at me, his voice gentle but firm. "Mrs. Novak, I know this must be incredibly difficult for you, but I promise you we will do everything in our power to bring Natalie to justice." I nod, my throat tight with emotion. "Thank you, Detective. I can't believe she could do this to her own sister, to our family." Detective Becker's eyes are filled with understanding. "Sometimes the people closest to us are capable of the greatest betrayal, but that doesn't make it your fault, Mrs. Novak. You couldn't have known." His words are a small comfort, but the guilt still gnaws at me. If only I had seen the signs earlier. If only I had protected Lydia from Natalie's machinations. I push the thoughts aside, focusing on the task at hand. "What happens now, Detective?" Detective Becker leans forward, his voice low and serious. "We'll bring Natalie in for questioning. With the evidence you've provided, we have enough to charge her with fraud and conspiracy. And if we can prove she supplied Lydia with the drugs that killed her..." He trails off, letting the implication hang heavy in the air. My heart clenches at the thought, but I know it's a possibility I can't ignore. Do what you need to do, Detective. I want the truth, no matter how painful it may be. Detective Becker nods, his expression grim. We'll keep you informed every step of the way, Mrs. Novak. You have my word. As I leave the station, I feel a sense of purpose settle over me. Natalie may have destroyed Lydia's life, but I won't let her get away with it. I'll see this through to the end, no matter the cost. The days that follow are a blur of interviews and investigations. The detectives work tirelessly, piecing together the evidence and building their case against Natalie, and with each new development, the truth becomes clearer and more horrifying. Natalie's jealousy and resentment had festered for years, turning into a twisted obsession with power and control. She had manipulated Lydia, exploiting her vulnerabilities and dreams, all for her own gain. And when Lydia had tried to break free, Natalie had taken the ultimate revenge. The final piece of the puzzle falls into place when the toxicology report comes back, confirming my worst fears. The drugs in Lydia's system were a lethal combination, one that could only have been supplied by someone with access and knowledge. Someone like Natalie. I feel a wave of nausea wash over me as the reality sinks in. My own daughter, a murderer. The betrayal cuts deep, leaving me raw and bleeding. But even in the depths of my despair, I feel a flicker of hope. The truth is out there now, and Natalie will have to face the consequences of her actions. Justice will be served, and Lydia will finally be able to rest in peace. I steel myself for the battle ahead, knowing that it won't be easy. Natalie is cunning and ruthless, and she won't go down without a fight, but I'm ready to face her, to look her in the eye and make her answer for what she's done. For Lydia, for the daughter I lost, I will be strong. I will be the voice she can no longer raise, the justice she can no longer seek. And I will not rest until Natalie pays for her sins, no matter the price. The day of reckoning arrives, and I find myself standing outside Natalie's law firm, my heart pounding in my chest. Detective Becker and his team are by my side, their faces set with determination. We're here to confront Natalie, to make her answer for her crimes. As we enter the building, I feel a sense of unease wash over me. The sleek, modern interior feels cold and impersonal, a stark contrast to the turmoil raging inside me. We make our way to Natalie's office, the sound of our footsteps echoing through the halls. Natalie looks up as we enter, her eyes widening in surprise. But the shock quickly fades, replaced by a cold, calculating look. "Mother," she says, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "What brings you here?" Detective Becker steps forward, his voice firm and authoritative. "Natalie Novak, we have evidence linking you to the illegal scheme that defrauded your sister and ultimately led to her death. We also have reason to believe you supplied her with the drugs that killed her." Natalie's face twists into a sneer, her true colors finally showing. "You can't prove anything," she hisses, her eyes darting between us. "Lydia was a drug addict. She did this to herself." I feel a surge of anger course through me, and I step forward, my voice shaking with emotion. "How dare you?" I spit, my hands clenched into fists. "Lydia was your sister. She loved you, and you destroyed her. You manipulated her, lied to her, and then you killed her." Natalie laughs, a harsh, grating sound that sends shivers down my spine. "Oh, please. Lydia was weak. She was always holding me back with her silly dreams and her pathetic art. She got what she deserved." Detective Becker's face hardens, and he motions to his team. "Natalie Novak, you're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and murder. You have the right to remain silent." As the detectives move in, Natalie's facade finally cracks. She lunges forward, her face contorted with rage. "You can't do this to me," she screams, her voice echoing off the walls. "I'm untouchable. I'm the one with the power here." But the detectives are quick, and they restrain her, snapping handcuffs around her wrists. Natalie thrashes and screams, her carefully crafted persona shattering before our eyes. "You did this to yourself, Natalie," I say, my voice cold and hard. "You let your jealousy and greed consume you, and now you'll pay the price." As the detectives lead her away, Natalie's eyes lock with mine, and for a moment I see a flicker of the girl she once was. The sister who played with Lydia, who laughed and dreamed and loved. But it's gone in an instant, replaced by a hatred so deep it takes my breath away. "This isn't over, Mother," her voice dripping with venom. "I'll make you pay for this. I'll make you all pay." But her threats are empty now, and I watch as she's led out of the office, a shell of the woman she once was. The truth is out there now, and Natalie will face the consequences of her actions. As we leave the building, Detective Becker turns to me, his face softening. "You did the right thing, Mrs. Novak. I know it couldn't have been easy but you helped bring a dangerous criminal to justice." I nod, feeling a sense of bittersweet relief wash over me. "I just wish I could have done more," I whisper, my voice thick with emotion. "I wish I could have saved Lydia." Detective Becker places a comforting hand on my shoulder, his eyes filled with understanding. "You did everything you could, Mrs. Novak. Lydia would be proud of you." As we part ways, I feel a sense of purpose settle over me. Natalie may be in custody, but my fight is far from over. I'll make sure she pays for what she's done, and I'll honor Lydia's memory in every way I can. For my daughter, for the light she brought to this world, I will be strong. I will be the justice she deserves, no matter the cost. The interrogation room is cold and sterile, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows on Natalie's face. She sits across from me, her wrists shackled, her eyes filled with a mixture of defiance and fear. Detective Becker is by my side, his presence a silent support. "Why, Natalie?" I ask, my voice trembling with emotion. "Why did you do this to your own sister?" Natalie's lips curl into a sneer, her voice dripping with disdain. "You always favored her, didn't you? Perfect little Lydia, with her art and her dreams. You never saw me, never appreciated what I could do." I feel a surge of anger course through me, and I lean forward, my eyes locked with hers. "I loved you both, Natalie. I wanted nothing more than for you to be happy, to find your own path in life, but you let your jealousy consume you, and look where it's led you." Natalie scoffs, rolling her eyes. "Spare me the lecture, Mother. You have no idea what it was like living in Lydia's shadow. She had everything handed to her while I had to fight for every scrap of recognition." Detective Becker clears his throat, his voice firm and steady. "Miss Novak, we have evidence that you manipulated your sister into participating in an illegal scheme. We also have reason to believe you supplied her with the drugs that ultimately led to her death. Do you have anything to say for yourself?" For a moment, Natalie's facade cracks, and I see a flicker of fear in her eyes. But it's gone just as quickly, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. "You have no proof," she hisses, her voice low and venomous. "It's all circumstantial. No jury will convict me." I feel a wave of disgust wash over me, and I shake my head in disbelief. "How can you be so callous, Natalie? Your sister is dead because of you. Do you feel no remorse, no guilt?" Natalie's eyes narrow, and she leans forward, her voice a low, menacing whisper. "Guilt? Why should I feel guilty? Lydia was weak, pathetic. She didn't have the strength to survive in this world. I did what I had to do to get ahead, and if she couldn't keep up, that's her problem." I reel back, stunned by the depths of Natalie's cruelty. Detective Becker places a hand on my shoulder, his voice gentle but firm. "Mrs. Novak, I think it's time we let the evidence speak for itself." He nods to the officer standing guard, who steps forward with a thick file in hand. "Natalie Novak, we have evidence linking you to the fraudulent scheme, including emails, bank records, and witness statements. We also have the toxicology report confirming that the drugs found in Lydia's system were a direct match to those you supplied her with." Natalie's face pales, and for the first time, I see a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. That's not possible," she stammers, her voice losing its edge. "I was careful. I covered my tracks." Detective Becker shakes his head, a grim smile on his face. "Not well enough, Ms. Novak. We have everything we need to bring charges against you. It's over." Natalie slumps back in her chair, her shoulders sagging in defeat. For a moment, I almost feel a flicker of pity for her. But then I remember Lydia, remember the life that was stolen from her, and my resolve hardens once more. "I hope you rot in prison, Natalie," I say, my voice cold and hard. "I hope you spend every day of your life haunted by what you've done. You may be my daughter, but you're no longer a part of this family." As the officers lead Natalie away, I feel a sense of bittersweet justice wash over me. Lydia's death will never be undone, but at least now her killer will face the consequences of her actions. I turn to Detective Becker, my eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," I whisper, my voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for helping me bring Lydia justice." He nods, his face softening with compassion. It's my job, Mrs. Novak, but more than that, it's the right thing to do. Your daughter deserved better, and now she can finally rest in peace. As I leave the station, I feel a sense of purpose settle over me. Natalie may be gone, but Lydia's memory will live on. I'll make sure of it, no matter the cost. The courtroom is packed, the air heavy with anticipation as the judge takes her seat. Natalie sits at the defendant's table, her face a mask of cold indifference. I watch her from the gallery, my heart heavy with a mixture of grief and anger. The prosecutor stands, his voice ringing out clear and strong as he presents the case against Natalie. He lays out the evidence piece by piece, painting a picture of greed, jealousy, and ultimately murder. With each revelation, the courtroom grows more and more silent, the weight of Natalie's crimes hanging heavy in the air. When it's Natalie's turn to speak, she rises from her seat, her head held high. But as she begins to spin her web of lies and excuses, I feel a surge of disgust wash over me. How can she stand there so unrepentant, so unashamed of what she's done? But the jury sees through her facade, and when the verdict is read, the courtroom erupts in a chorus of gasps and murmurs. Guilty on all counts. Natalie's face twists with rage, and for a moment I fear she might lash out. But the bailiffs are quick to restrain her, and she's led away in handcuffs, her screams of protest echoing through the halls. As the courtroom empties, I feel a sense of hollow victory wash over me. Justice has been served, but at what cost? My daughters are gone, one to death and the other to prison. Our family is shattered, broken beyond repair. I make my way to Lydia's studio, the place where she once poured her heart and soul into her art. The room is just as she left it, a testament to the life she'll never get to live. As I wander through the space, my eyes fall on a series of paintings tucked away in the corner. I pull them out, my breath catching in my throat as I take in the images before me. They're portraits of our family, rendered in Lydia's signature style. But it's not the technical skill that strikes me. It's the love and warmth that radiates from each brushstroke. There's a painting of Lydia and Natalie as children, their arms wrapped around each other, their faces split in identical grins. Another shows the four of us gathered around the dinner table, laughing and talking, a perfect snapshot of happier times. As I stare at the paintings, I feel a sudden rush of emotion wash over me. Lydia may be gone, but her love, her spirit, lives on in these images. She captured the best of us, the moments of joy and togetherness that defined our family. I know then, with a sudden clarity, what I must do. I'll honor Lydia's memory, not just by seeking justice for her death, but by celebrating her life. I'll take these paintings and I'll share them with the world. I'll let them see the beauty and the talent that was taken from us too soon. I'll open a gallery in Lydia's name, a place where her art can live on and inspire others. It won't bring her back, but it will ensure that her legacy endures, that her light continues to shine. As I gather up the paintings, I feel a sense of purpose wash over me. This is how I'll keep Lydia's memory alive, how I'll find meaning in the face of such senseless tragedy. Natalie may have taken my daughter from me, but she can't take away the love and the pride I feel for her. I step out of the studio, the paintings clutch to my chest, and I feel a sense of peace wash over me. The road ahead won't be easy, but I know now that I'm not alone. Lydia's spirit will guide me, will give me the strength to keep going, no matter what lies ahead. And so I begin, one step at a time, to pick up the pieces of my shattered life. I'll build something new from the ruins, something beautiful and strong, just like my Lydia. And in doing so, I'll find a way to heal, to honor the daughter I lost, and to keep her memory alive, now and forever.
Success tastes like copper pennies and bitter almonds. I learned this standing at the podium of the Grand Meridian Hotel, watching my family's faces fade into practiced indifference as I accepted the Morrison account, the biggest deal of my career. My name is Catherine, and I've spent 28 years being the responsible one, the achiever, the daughter who never caused trouble. Fat lot of good that did me. And so we're thrilled to welcome Meridian Technologies as our newest partner, I concluded, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. The applause was genuine, enthusiastic, from everyone except the 4 people seated at table 6. My mother, Linda, was already turned towards Sophie, adjusting my younger sister's perfectly styled hair. Sophie beamed, basking in the attention like a cat in sunlight. My father, Michael, checked his watch, his expression suggesting he'd rather be anywhere else. "Absolutely brilliant presentation, Catherine," Daniel whispered as I returned to my seat. "That contract is going to change everything for the firm." I managed a tight smile, watching Sophie lean forward, her voice carrying across 3 tables. "Oh my God, Mom. Wait until you hear about the charity gala I'm organizing. The governor's wife personally asked me to chair the committee." The speed with which my parents' heads snapped up was almost comical. Almost. "Darling, that's wonderful." My mother's voice dripped with the pride she'd never shown for my achievements. "Michael, did you hear that? Our Sophie working with the governor's wife." "That's my girl," Dad said, actually putting his phone down. "Always knew you'd do great things." The copper taste flooded my mouth again. 3 years of 60-hour weeks, countless missed holidays, and a relationship sacrificed at the altar of career advancement. All dismissed in favor of Sophie's latest social climbing venture. Emma, my best friend, squeezed my arm under the table. "Don't let them get to you," she murmured. "They're not worth it." But they were. They were my family, and their indifference cut deeper than any stranger's criticism ever could. "Speaking of the gala," Sophie announced, loud enough to draw attention from nearby tables, "I'll need some help with the funding. Daddy, remember that investment account we discussed?" I froze. The investment account. The one Dad had promised would help me with the down payment on my first house. The one I'd been counting on after pouring my savings into paying off my student loans. "Of course, sweetheart," Dad replied without hesitation. "Whatever you need." The room tilted slightly. I grabbed my water glass, condensation cool against my palm, and took a careful sip. Across the table, Daniel was saying something about the implementation timeline for the Morrison project, but his words were distant. Underwater. "Catherine?" He touched my sleeve. "Are you okay?" "Excuse me," I managed, standing abruptly. My chair scraped against the floor, drawing glances. Sophie's tinkling laugh followed me as I walked. Didn't run, never run, toward the exit. The hotel's marble bathroom was mercifully empty. I gripped the counter, staring at my reflection. Professional makeup, carefully styled hair, the designer suit I'd spent too much on because I wanted to look perfect for this presentation. All that effort, and they couldn't even pretend to care. My phone buzzed. A text from Emma. "They're asking where you went. Sophie's telling everyone you're probably stressed about the presentation. Want me to say something?" Another buzz. "Daniel. Morrison asking to discuss timeline details? Should I stall?" Final buzz. Sophie. "OMG, sis. So dramatic. BTW, can you send me Dad's investment guy's number? Need it for the gala stuff. XOXO. I looked at my reflection again, but this time I saw something different. Something harder. Colder. The good daughter. The responsible one. The achiever. She was still there. But now there was someone else too. Someone who'd finally had enough. I texted Sophie back. "Can't wait to help with the gala. Let's talk details soon." It wasn't even a lie. I was going to help with her precious gala, just not in the way she expected. I reapplied my lipstick, straightened my jacket, and headed back to the ballroom. Time to play the perfect daughter one last time. The Morrison contract sits on my desk like a trophy, but the victory feels hollow when my phone lights up with another group text from Mom. "Sophie's charity gala made the society pages. Look at our beautiful girl making waves." I scrolled through the attached photos. Sophie in her element, working the room in a dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. The governor's wife appears in 3 shots, each time with her hand on Sophie's shoulder like they're old friends. "Your sister's really found her calling," Daniel says, leaning against my office doorframe. "Though between you and me, that gala's budget seems ambitious." I look up sharply. "What do you mean?" "The Morrison numbers came across my desk this morning. I noticed your father's investment firm is handling the gala's funding. Nearly $500,000. He pauses, watching my reaction. That's a lot of champagne and centerpieces. The copper taste returns to my mouth. $500,000. My house down payment vanishing into Sophie's social climbing fantasy. "Interesting," I say, keeping my voice neutral. I wasn't aware of the specifics. Catherine! Sophie bursts into my office, trailing expensive perfume and entitlement. Thank God you're here. I need the most massive favor. Daniel retreats, shooting me a knowing look. Sophie drops into my visitor's chair, already typing on her phone. The gala venue fell through, she announces. Some nonsense about unpaid deposits. But you know the event space at Morrison Technologies, right? The one with the rooftop garden? It would be perfect. My fingers tighten on my pen. That space is for corporate events only. Client meetings, product launches. But you're basically running things there now, Sophie interrupts. After that contract thing, just pull some strings. For me? She deploys the pleading look that always works on our parents. It's not that simple. God, why do you always make everything so difficult? Sophie's mask slips for a moment, revealing irritation. Mom said you'd probably be like this. She said ever since your promotion, you've gotten so corporate. The pen snaps in my hand, ink staining my fingers. What exactly does Mom say about me? Oh, you know. Sophie waves dismissively. Just that maybe you're working too hard. That it's making you bitter. I mean, when's the last time you even went on a date? Before I can respond, Emma appears in the doorway. Her eyes narrow at Sophie's presence. Ready for lunch? She asks me, then adds with calculated sweetness. Sophie, I love your dress. Isn't that the same one from the charity brunch last month? Sophie stiffens. No, this is completely different. It's designer. My mistake. Emma's smile doesn't reach her eyes. Must be thinking of something else. I gather my things, watching Sophie's fingers drum anxiously on her phone case. About the venue. Just think about it. Sophie cuts in. For me, family should help family, right? The words hit like a slap. I think of the investment account, of years of missed birthdays because Sophie's celebrations took precedence, of Mom's constant stream of praise for Sophie's social achievements while my professional ones warranted only distracted nods. You're right, I say slowly. Family should help family. Sophie beams, already reaching for her phone, but I'm not finished. Which is why I'll need to review the gala's financial records before I can even consider the venue request. Standard corporate procedure. I'm sure you understand. The color drains from Sophie's face. That's not necessary. I have everything under control. Then there shouldn't be a problem. I stand, gathering my bag. Send me the documentation by Friday. But Friday, I repeat firmly. After all, family should help family be accountable, right? Sophie leaves in a flurry of protests and slammed doors. Emma watches her go, then turns to me with raised eyebrows. That was different, she observes. Usually you just give in. I examine the ink stains on my fingers, thinking of Daniel's casual mention of $500,000, of Sophie's panic at the mention of documentation. Things are going to be different from now on, I say quietly. I think it's time for some family accountability. Emma studies my face. Just be careful. You know how your family closes ranks around Sophie when she's threatened. I'm counting on it. I grab my coat, already mentally drafting emails to the Morrison accounting department. Let's get lunch. I have some ideas I want to run by you. The ink on my fingers looks almost like bruises, or maybe battle scars. Either way, I'm done playing the perfect daughter. It's time to see what's really hiding behind Sophie's perfectly curated facade. The file drawer crashes open with the force of my frustration. 3 hours of digging through Dad's office while he's at his golf game, and I found nothing about Sophie's gala finances. But as I move to slam it shut, a flash of red catches my eye. An unmarked folder tucked behind the others. Inside, credit card statements spill out like autumn leaves, all in Sophie's name, all maxed out. The numbers blur together until one transaction snaps into focus. A $70,000 withdrawal from Dad's investment account, dated 2 days after my presentation. My phone buzzes. Emma. You need to see this. Now. 20 minutes later, I'm staring at Emma's laptop screen in her design studio. My hands shaking around a coffee cup gone cold. I was doing the preliminary designs for Sophie's gala materials. Emma says, scrolling through a spreadsheet. But these numbers don't add up. The venue she claims to have booked? They've never heard of her. The catering deposit she supposedly paid? The company doesn't exist. How did you get this? Olivia sent it to me by mistake. Wrong email address. Emma's voice hardens. She's Sophie's front person for all this, collecting donations, handling vendors, except most of the money isn't going where it's supposed to. The office door opens and Daniel steps in, his face grim. Sorry to interrupt, but Catherine needs to see this too. He holds up his phone. The Morrison account numbers came back weird. Someone's been accessing the corporate system using your login credentials. The coffee cup slips from my fingers, shattering on the floor. What? Small transfers at first, then bigger ones. All traced back to your authentication codes. He pauses. The last one was this morning, $50,000. That's impossible. The words die in my throat as I remember Sophie hovering over my desk last week, asking to use my computer while I was in a meeting. Oh, God. My phone rings. Mom's name flashes on the screen. I answer on speaker. Catherine, thank goodness. Have you spoken to your sister today? She's not answering her phone, and she was supposed to meet me for the gala planning lunch. No, I haven't. Well, if you see her, tell her the governor's wife is asking questions about the donation allocations. Nothing serious, just some confusion about the numbers. Sophie will know how to handle it. The line goes dead before I can respond. Emma and Daniel exchange looks. Catherine, Emma says carefully, if Sophie's been embezzling from both your family and your company, she's not just embezzling. I interrupt, the pieces clicking together like a toxic puzzle. She's using my name to do it. If this comes out, I'm implicated. My career, my reputation. The studio door flies open. Sophie bursts in, mascara streaked down her face. You have to help me, she gasps. They're asking questions. The governor's office, the donors, they want records. Real ones. Like the records you forged using my login. My voice sounds strange, distant. Or the ones showing you drained Dad's investment account? Sophie freezes. For a moment, I see the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, seeking protection. Then her face hardens. You don't understand, she hisses. I had to. Everyone expects certain things from me. The right clothes, the right connections. Mom and Dad's help wasn't enough anymore. But you, with your perfect job and your perfect reputation, you could afford to help me. By stealing my identity? By putting my entire career at risk? Oh, please, she scoffs, but her voice trembles. Like you've ever cared about anything except your precious career. Some sister you are. Emma steps forward, but I raise a hand to stop her. You're right, Sophie. I am your sister. I reach for my phone. Which is why I'm going to do what I should have done years ago. What are you doing? Calling the police. My finger hovers over the keypad. Unless you'd prefer I call the governor's office first? Sophie's face drains of color. You wouldn't. Mom and Dad would never forgive you. I think of the credit card statements, the forged documents, the years of being overshadowed and dismissed. Maybe not, but I forgave you for too long, and look where that got us. I'll tell them everything was your idea, she threatens, backing toward the door. They'll believe me. They always believe me. Not this time. I hold up my phone, recording app running. This time, everyone's going to hear the truth. Sophie runs. The door slams behind her, leaving silence broken only by the soft beep of the recording saving. Catherine, Emma whispers, what are you going to do? I look at the shattered coffee cup on the floor, dark liquid spreading like blood. Whatever it takes to make this right. Starting now. The boardroom feels like a tomb as I stare at the email on the projector screen. My login credentials, timestamps of unauthorized transfers, and Sophie's name, all laid out in corporate black and white. The Morrison account has been compromised. The chief financial officer announces, Catherine, given your personal connection to this situation, we're offering you a choice. Ryan, newly promoted to marketing director, won't meet my eyes. He'd been the one to flag the suspicious activity, doing his job, protecting the company, and destroying any chance we had. What kind of choice? My voice sounds hollow even to me. Handle this internally. Make the money reappear. Smooth things over with the governor's office regarding the gala irregularities. In return, we keep this quiet. The CFO slides a document across the table. Or we launch a formal investigation. Either way, we need an answer by tomorrow morning. Daniel shifts beside me. Catherine has been instrumental in the Morrison account's success. Surely we can... This isn't about past performance. Ryan interrupts, still avoiding my gaze. It's about liability. The word hangs in the air like poison. I think of Sophie's threats, the recording on my phone, Dad's investment account drained dry. One signature could make it all disappear, along with any chance of justice. My phone buzzes. Mom. Family dinner tonight. Non-negotiable. Sophie's very upset about your accusations. Another buzz. Sophie. Hope you're happy. Mom and Dad are mortgaged to the hilt because of me. Expose me and they lose everything. Your choice, sis. The CFO clears his throat. Catherine? I need time to think. Until tomorrow morning, he reminds me. Not a minute longer. Outside the boardroom, Daniel catches my arm. Whatever you're planning, be careful. Sophie's not the only one with something to lose here. I know exactly what I have to lose. I pull away, but he persists. Do you? Because Ryan's team is already distancing themselves from the Morrison account. Your reputation... My reputation? I laugh, the sound sharp enough to make him flinch. My sister stole my identity, drained my parents' savings, and implicated me in fraud. What reputation? Emma's waiting in my office, face grim. Your mother called me. They're saying you're having some kind of breakdown, imagining things about Sophie. They want me to talk sense into you. Of course they do. I sink into my chair, touching the flash drive in my pocket containing every damning piece of evidence. Did she mention the mortgage? No, but Olivia's been bragging about Sophie's new summer house, the one she supposedly bought with her investment returns. The pieces click together with nauseating clarity. Sophie hadn't just stolen from our parents. She'd convinced them to mortgage their home to cover her tracks. My phone rings. Ryan, I had to report it, he says without preamble. But there might be another way. The company would rather avoid scandal. If you take responsibility, claim it was an accounting error. You want me to confess to my sister's crimes? I want to help you protect your family. His voice softens. And maybe save what we could have had. The truth hits like a physical blow. You knew. You knew about Sophie's schemes before you reported them. His silence is answer enough. How long were you gathering evidence against me while we were dating? Catherine. I hang up, hands shaking. Emma watches me with growing concern. What are you going to do? The answer comes with startling clarity. I reach for my laptop, pulling up the company's ethics hotline. Catherine, wait, Emma warns. Think about your parents, the mortgage. I've spent my entire life thinking about everyone else. My fingers hover over the keyboard. Maybe it's time they thought about me. They're still your family. No. I think of Sophie's threats, my parents' willful blindness, Ryan's betrayal. They're people who took advantage of my love for them? There's a difference. My phone lights up with another text from Sophie. Last chance, sis. Make this go away, or I'll tell them everything was your idea. Your choice. I start typing my report, each word a nail in the coffin of the person I used to be. The good daughter, the responsible one, the protector. You're right, Sophie, I whisper, hitting submit. It is my choice. The confirmation email arrives instantly. Thank you for your report. An investigator will contact you within 24 hours. There's no going back now, only forward into whatever wreckage awaits. The governor's wife's garden party buzzes with whispers as I circulate, each casual conversation a carefully placed landmine. I've spent 2 weeks leaking pieces of Sophie's financial misdeeds to key society players, watching her carefully constructed world crack like thin ice. Such a shame about the gala funding, I say to Olivia's mother, who sits on 3 charity boards. The unauthorized transfers, the missing donations. Her eyes widen. Missing donations? Oh. I feign surprise. I assumed Sophie had explained everything. Across the lawn, Sophie holds court near the rose garden, but her audience has thinned considerably. Even from here, I can see the strain in her smile, the way she clutches her champagne glass too tightly. Catherine. Daniel appears at my elbow, his expression grave. We need to talk. Now. In a quiet corner behind the catering tent, he shows me his phone. The ethics investigation is expanding. They're looking at everyone connected to the Morrison account, including your parents' investment firm. What? That wasn't part of... Your father's signature is on some of Sophie's fraudulent documents. Did you know? The ground seems to shift beneath my feet. That's impossible. Dad would never... Catherine. Mom's voice cuts through the air like a whip. She marches toward us, her society smile firmly in place until we're out of earshot. What have you done? What have I done? The words taste like acid. The governor's wife just pulled Sophie's gala funding. Our friends are asking questions about money, our private financial matters. Her fingers dig into my arm. Fix this, now. Like you fixed things for Sophie? By mortgaging your house? The color drains from her face. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. Dad signed fraudulent documents to protect Sophie, didn't he? That's why you're both so desperate to keep this quiet. Your sister needed help. And I needed parents who gave a damn about anyone besides Sophie. Heads turn at my outburst. Mom's face hardens. If you pursue this, you'll destroy this family. You did that yourselves. I pull away, but she grabs my wrist. Think carefully about your next move. She hisses. You're not the only one with evidence. Remember that project you handled last year? The one with the irregular reporting? Sophie made copies of everything. Ice floods my veins. The Richardson account, where I'd covered up some minor discrepancies to save the deal. Nothing illegal, but enough to raise questions about my judgment. You're blackmailing me? Your own daughter? I'm protecting this family, like I've always done. Emma appears, sensing tension. Catherine, you okay? Before I can respond, Sophie storms over, mascara smeared. The governor's wife just uninvited me from the summer benefit. My own committee. She jabs a finger at my chest. This is your fault. Sophie, Mom warns, but she's too far gone. You couldn't stand that people finally saw me as successful, could you? Sophie's voice rises hysterically. Had to tear me down to make yourself feel better. Well, guess what? If I'm going down, you're coming with me. She pulls out her phone, fingers flying over the screen. My phone buzzes immediately. Screenshots of the Richardson account irregularities copied to the ethics committee. There, Sophie spits. Now everyone can see what St. Catherine is really like. The party has gone silent, witnesses gathering like vultures. Daniel swears under his breath. Emma steps forward protectively, but something inside me has gone very, very quiet. You know what's funny? I say, my voice eerily calm. I spent years thinking I needed your approval. All of you. But now? I pull up the recording from our last confrontation, Sophie's confession about the stolen money playing clearly. Now I realize you need mine. You wouldn't. Mom breathes. Try me. I turn to the growing crowd, raising my voice. Would anyone like to hear what really happened to the gala donations? Catherine, please. Sophie whispers, fear replacing anger in her eyes. You'll ruin everything. I look at my sister, really look at her, and see the scared little girl who always needed to be the center of attention. At Mom, whose protection of Sophie has become a prison for us all. At the society vultures waiting for blood. You're right, I say softly. I will. I press play and watch my family's carefully constructed world begin to burn. The truth, it turns out, sounds like breaking glass and tastes like victory. Or maybe that's just the champagne I grabbed from a passing waiter as Sophie's carefully curated audience watches their golden girl fall from grace. Sometimes the only way to fix a broken family is to shatter it completely. The annual charity gala gleams like a funeral. Black ties, evening gowns, and beneath it all, the stench of impending disaster. I adjust my earpiece, watching the security feeds I've arranged in the Morrison Technologies event space. "Sophie's arrived," Daniel murmurs through the comm. She looks unstable. Through the lobby camera, I watch my sister stumble slightly, already wine-flushed. Her designer dress hangs loose. She's lost weight since the garden party revelations. Behind her, Mom clutches Dad's arm like a lifeline, both of them scanning the crowd nervously. The governor's wife is asking about the missing donations. Emma reports from her position near the bar. Channel 7 News just arrived too. Everything's falling into place. The anonymous tips to the media, the carefully timed release of financial records, the invitation list crafted to ensure maximum witness impact. My revenge served on silver platters between champagne courses. So why does my chest feel so hollow? "Catherine." Ryan materializes beside me, looking sharp in his tuxedo. "The ethics committee wants to interview you Monday morning about the Richardson account." "Not now. They're talking criminal charges. For all of us." Before I can respond, Sophie's voice rings out across the ballroom. "Where is she? Where's my beloved sister?" The crowd parts like water. Sophie stands in the center, mascara already smearing, clutching a manila envelope. "I have something for the news crew," she announces. "About our perfect Catherine, about what she did to get where she is." Mom rushes forward. "Sophie, please." "No, she destroyed everything. My reputation, my friends, my life." Sophie's voice cracks. Now it's her turn. I step into view. "Go ahead." The room goes silent. Sophie falters, clearly not expecting my appearance. "Show them," I continue, moving closer. "Show them how I fudged the Richardson numbers, how I covered for incompetent colleagues, how I played the game to get ahead." Each step feels like walking through glass. But first, let's show them what you did with the gala donations. "Catherine," Dad warns, but I'm done being warned. I nod to Emma, who activates the presentation screen. Bank statements appear, showing the twisted path of embezzled funds. Sophie's unauthorized transfers, Dad's forged signatures, Mom's desperate cover-ups. "Stop," Sophie whispers. The summer house purchases, the credit card fraud, the identity theft. Each new slide lands like a bullet. "Everything you did while hiding behind my name." I said stop. Sophie lunges forward, but her heel catches. She stumbles, the manila envelope spilling across the floor. But instead of the Richardson documents, photographs scatter across the marble. Old family photos, birthday parties, graduations, holidays. All with me cropped or blurred in the background while Sophie shines in the center. The room spins slightly. I hear gasps, see phones recording, feel the weight of hundreds of eyes. "I just wanted them to see me." Sophie sobs, dropping to her knees among the photos. "Like they always saw you." "Saw me?" The laugh that escapes sounds foreign. "They never saw me. I was the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who didn't need attention because I was too busy cleaning up everyone else's messes." "Catherine," Emma warns in my earpiece. "The news crew? You want a story?" I address the reporters directly. "Here's your story. Successful executive discovers sister's fraud scheme. Parents mortgage house to cover it up. Family implodes. Film at 11. Please," Mom begs. "We're your family." "No." I look at Sophie, still crying among the scattered photographs of her perfect life. At Dad, gray-faced and silent. At Mom, desperate to preserve her illusion of family harmony. "You're just people who share my DNA." The room erupts in chaos. Reporters shout questions. Society matrons whisper behind jeweled hands. Through my earpiece, I hear Daniel saying something urgent about damage control. But all I can see is one particular photograph by my feet, Sophie's 16th birthday. She's radiant in the center, surrounded by admirers. And there in the corner, barely visible, is my reflection in a window, watching from the outside like always. I turn and walk away, leaving my family to drown in the truth they created. My heels click against marble, each step echoing with finality. "Catherine, wait," Ryan calls after me. "The ethics committee." "Let them come," I say without turning. I'm done hiding. The night air hits like a slap as I exit the building. Behind me, my family's carefully constructed world burns to ash. Ahead, nothing but uncertainty. I've won. I've lost. Maybe they're the same thing. The ethics committee's conference room feels like an execution chamber. My parents sit across from me, flanked by their lawyers. Sophie huddles in the corner, hollow-eyed and silent. The morning news plays silently on a wall-mounted TV, showing footage from last night's gala implosion. Let's review the timeline. The committee chair begins, but Dad interrupts. "Before we continue, there's something you should know." He slides a folder across the table. Evidence that Catherine orchestrated this entire situation. My lawyer starts to object, but I wave her off. "Show them." Inside are documents I've never seen before. Emails, bank statements, meeting notes dating back years, all suggesting I'd been manipulating company funds long before Sophie's schemes began. "Impressive forgeries," I say quietly. "When did you make them?" Mom flinches. Dad's jaw tightens. "These are authentic. Like the signatures you forged for Sophie's loans?" I pull out my phone, playing a recording. Dad's voice fills the room, clearly instructing a bank manager to process documents using my credentials. "You recorded me?" The betrayal in his voice would have hurt once. Now it just feels hollow. I recorded everything. I look at Sophie. "Including the real reason behind Mom and Dad's devotion to you." Sophie's head snaps up. Mom goes pale. "Catherine," she warns, but I'm done with warnings. "Tell her," I say to my parents. "Or I will." The silence stretches like a wire about to snap. Finally, Dad breaks. "The company was failing," he whispers. 24 years ago, we were about to lose everything. Then your mother's family offered to invest, on one condition." Sophie's confusion turns to horror as understanding dawns. They wanted a grandchild to groom as heir to their empire. Mom continues, tears streaming. We already had Catherine, but she wasn't what they wanted. So you had me," Sophie finishes, "as a business transaction." "We loved you," Mom insists. "Both of you." "No." I stand, my chair scraping back. "You loved what Sophie represented. Status, security, social standing. You loved the idea of her so much you let her destroy herself trying to live up to it. That's not... Your perfect daughter," I continue, "is facing criminal charges for fraud. Your family's reputation is in ruins. The company you sacrificed everything to save is imploding. How's that for irony?" Sophie makes a sound like a wounded animal. "You knew? All this time you knew I was just a business arrangement?" "I found the contract last month," I say. "In Dad's office, along with evidence of every scheme, every cover-up, every lie they told to keep their investment safe." The committee chair clears his throat. "Miss Harrison, I accept full responsibility for the Richardson account irregularities," I interrupt. "And I have documentation proving Sophie acted alone in the charity fraud. The rest..." I look at my family, these strangers who share my blood. The rest is just family history. "Catherine, please," Dad begs. "We can fix this." "Like you fixed me? By pushing me aside because I wasn't the daughter your investors wanted?" Sophie stands abruptly, swaying. "I think I'm going to be sick." "Funny," I say, gathering my things. "That's how I felt every time they chose you." "Wait." Sophie grabs my arm as I pass. "I didn't know about any of it. I thought I thought they loved me more. For the first time, I see my sister. Really see her. Not the golden child or the spoiled princess, but a pawn in our parents' desperate game. They did love you more, I say gently. They just loved their social standing most of all. The committee tries to call me back, but I'm already walking away. Behind me, I hear Sophie's sobs, Mom's pleas, Dad's silence. My phone buzzes. Emma. You okay? I look back through the conference room window. Sophie crying in the corner. Our parents frozen in their seats, the committee shuffling papers that document our family's implosion. No, I text back. But I'm free. The elevator doors close on the sound of Sophie calling my name. I don't look back. Some things, once broken, can't be fixed. But maybe they were never whole to begin with. The city lights blur beneath my penthouse window, each one representing a life untouched by the implosion of the Harrison family legacy. My phone buzzes with another missed call from Sophie, the 12th today. I let it ring. Emma sets 2 glasses of wine on the marble counter. The ethics committee's verdict came through. I know. The email sits unopened in my inbox, its subject line glaring. Final decision regarding Harrison investigation. Your parents lost the company, she continues. Sophie's facing probation, and you got exactly what I wanted. I turn from the window. So why does victory taste like ash? The doorman calls up. Sophie's in the lobby, demanding to see me. For the first time in weeks, I tell him to let her up. She looks different when she enters. Thinner, sharper, her designer clothes replaced by simple jeans and a sweater. No makeup, no facade. I sold everything, she says without preamble. The summer house, the cars, the jewelry, paid back what I could. Good for you. Mom and Dad are divorcing. Also good. She flinches. Is that all you can say? Our family is destroyed. Our family was never real. I take a slow sip of wine. It was a business arrangement that got out of hand. Maybe for them. Sophie steps closer. But you were real. Your anger, your pain, that was real. And now what? You won. You're alone at the top of your tower while everyone else burns. Is this what freedom feels like? The wine turns sour in my mouth. Emma quietly excuses herself, leaving us alone with the truth we've both been avoiding. I found this in Dad's office, Sophie says, pulling out a faded photograph. Before they changed the locks. It's us, aged maybe 4 and 8, building a sandcastle. Before the pressure of expectations, before the weight of family legacy. Just 2 sisters, creating something together. We could have helped each other. She whispers. All those years, we could have been allies instead of enemies. You chose your side. I chose what they programmed me to choose. Her voice cracks. But you were stronger. You chose yourself. A text lights up my phone. Daniel, warning me about tomorrow's board meeting. Another from Ryan, still trying to explain his betrayal. Messages from a world I built from the ashes of my family's destruction. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Sophie continues. I'm not even asking to be sisters again. I need to know if it was worth it. This revenge, this victory. Did it fix what was broken inside you? The city lights seem dimmer now, the penthouse larger, emptier. I think of the family photos Sophie scattered across the gala floor, of Dad's forged documents, of Mom's desperate attempts to maintain appearances, of the little girl who spent her whole life trying to be seen. Nothing's fixed, I admit finally, but at least now I'm broken on my own terms. Sophie nods slowly, understanding more than I expected. She moves to leave, then pauses. I start therapy next week, she says. Real therapy, not the social anxiety counseling Mom always pushed. Maybe someday when we're both less broken. She leaves the photograph on the counter along with a business card for her therapist. After she's gone, I open the ethics committee email. Suspension, probation, mandatory oversight, consequences I can live with. The price of freedom. Emma returns, studying my face. You okay? I look at the photograph. Two sisters building something together before the world taught us to tear things down. No, I answer honestly, but maybe that's the point. My phone buzzes again. Another message from the past demanding attention. Instead, I turn it off and pour another glass of wine. The city stretches endlessly below, full of people living their own complicated truths. Somewhere out there, Sophie is starting over. Mom and Dad are facing their own reckonings. And I'm here, in my tower built of revenge and ambition, finally understanding that victory doesn't heal wounds. It just gives them new names. I raise my glass to my reflection in the window, to the woman who burned her world down to find herself in the ashes. To freedom, I whisper, whatever that means. The photograph stays on the counter, a reminder that some castles are built to fall, and sometimes that's okay.
Lila, don't play with your food, Nathan scolded, his eyes narrowing at our 10-year-old daughter. I tensed, bracing for another evening filled with his criticism. As I opened my mouth to defend Lila, she abruptly pushed her plate aside, the contents spilling onto the pristine tablecloth. "I'm sorry, Daddy," she said, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean to." Nathan slammed his fist on the table, making us both flinch. "How many times have I told you? We don't waste food in this household." My heart raced as his face reddened, the vein on his forehead pulsing. I knew that look all too well, the precursor to his rage. Before I could intervene, Lila's small hand reached out and knocked over Nathan's prized baseball, signed by Babe Ruth himself. It rolled off the table and hit the floor with a sickening thud. Time seemed to freeze as Nathan's eyes widened in disbelief. He turned his glare towards Lila, who shrank in her chair. "You little brat! Do you have any idea how much that's worth?" As he rose from his seat, I placed a trembling hand on his arm. "Nathan, please. It was an accident." He shrugged me off, his attention fixated on our daughter. "This is unacceptable behavior, Lila. You need to learn some respect." Lila's lips quivered and tears streamed down her cheeks. "I'm sorry, Daddy. I'm really, really sorry." To my horror, Nathan reached for his belt, and I knew what would come next. It was a pattern I'd witnessed countless times, his escalating rage followed by physical punishment under the guise of discipline. But this time, something shifted in Lila's eyes. Her tears stopped, and she straightened her back, her gaze locking with Nathan's. "No, Daddy. I won't let you hurt Mommy anymore." My breath caught in my throat as Lila's words hung in the air like a heavy curtain, lifting to reveal the ugly truth I'd been denying for years. Nathan froze, his face contorted in rage and confusion. "What did you say?" Lila turned to me, her expression a mixture of determination and sorrow. "Mommy, I've seen the way he treats you, the yelling, the pushing, the bruises you try to hide. It's not right." My carefully constructed facade crumbled as tears spilled down my cheeks. All the times I'd made excuses, all the lies I'd told myself and others, they unraveled in that single heart-wrenching moment. Nathan's face drained of color as he stared at us, his mouth agape. For once, he was speechless, stripped of his control and power. In that surreal silence, I realized that my sweet, brave daughter had given me the strength I'd been lacking all these years. The strength to face the truth, to protect her, and to break free from the cycle of abuse that had become my life. As I wrapped my arms around Lila, holding her close, I knew our lives would never be the same. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope. A hope for a future free from fear and oppression. A future where love triumphed over violence. The shattered remains of Nathan's prized baseball lay scattered on the floor, a fitting metaphor for the illusion that had just been destroyed. And in that moment, I vowed to never let anyone control or diminish me again. The aftermath of that fateful dinner was like a bomb going off in our household. The silence that followed Lila's revelation was deafening, broken only by the occasional clatter as Nathan paced back and forth, running his hands through his disheveled hair. "How dare you?" he seethed, shooting daggers at Lila with his eyes. "How dare you disrespect me like this in my own home?" Lila flinched, but held her ground. "I'm sorry, Daddy, but I won't let you hurt Mommy anymore." Nathan whirled to face me, his face contorted with rage. "Is this true, Janelle? Have you been filling her head with lies about me?" I swallowed hard, my heart pounding in my chest. This was the moment I'd dreaded for years, the confrontation that could either set me free or trap me further in his web of control. "No, Nathan," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Lila's telling the truth. I can't pretend anymore. His eyes narrowed, and he took a step towards me, his fists clenched at his sides. Pretend? You think this is some kind of game? Before he could advance further, Lila stepped between us, her small frame trembling but her eyes blazing with determination. Don't you touch her! Nathan recoiled as if struck, his expression a mix of disbelief and fury. How dare you speak to me like that, you ungrateful little brat! Don't call her that! I snapped, surprising even myself with the force of my words. Nathan's head whipped towards me, and for a moment I thought he might strike me, but something in my defiance seemed to give him pause. This is your doing, Janelle, he hissed. You've turned my own daughter against me. I shook my head, feeling a strange calm settle over me. No, Nathan, I've done nothing but endure your rage and abuse for far too long. Lila's just the one brave enough to see the truth. His face reddened, and he opened his mouth to retort, but I held up a hand, cutting him off. I'm done, Nathan. I'm done living in fear, walking on eggshells around you, making excuses for your behavior. It stops now. A flicker of uncertainty crossed his features, and for the first time I saw a crack in his armor of control. You can't be serious, he scoffed. But his words lacked their usual conviction. I've never been more serious in my life, I said, my voice steady and unwavering. This ends tonight. Nathan's gaze darted between Lila and me, and I could see the realization setting in. The years of manipulation and mind games were unraveling before his very eyes. You'll regret this, he spat, his words laced with venom. You won't have a penny to your name. I'll make sure of it. I squared my shoulders, emboldened by a newfound strength I hadn't felt in years. I don't care about your money, Nathan. All I care about is getting away from you and your abuse. His eyes widened, and for a moment I thought he might strike out in desperation. But Lila's unwavering stance seemed to give him pause, and he simply shook his head in disbelief. Fine, he growled. Get out, then. See how far you get without me. With those words, he turned on his heel and stormed out of the room, leaving Lila and me standing amidst the wreckage of our former lives. As I pulled my daughter into a tight embrace, tears of relief and determination streamed down my face. The facade had crumbled, and there was no turning back now. It was time to break free, no matter what it took. In the days following my confrontation with Nathan, the atmosphere in our home was thick with tension. He would often storm out without a word, returning late at night reeking of alcohol. Lila and I tiptoed around him, never knowing when his dormant rage might erupt. It was during this tumultuous time that I reconnected with an old friend, Mariah. We had drifted apart after I married Nathan, his controlling nature slowly isolating me from my support system. But when I finally found the courage to open up to Mariah about the truth of my marriage, she was a pillar of strength. Janelle, you have to get out of there, she urged, her voice laced with concern over the video call. What he's doing is abuse, plain and simple. I nodded, blinking back tears. I know, but it's not that simple. He's threatened to take everything from me if I leave, including Lila. Mariah's eyes hardened with resolve. Over my dead body. We'll find a way, Janelle. You and Lila deserve so much better than this. Her unwavering support was like a lifeline, giving me the courage to take the first tentative steps towards freedom. With Mariah's help, I began documenting every instance of Nathan's abuse, keeping a meticulous record of his outbursts, threats, and the rare but horrifying physical altercations. I started squirreling away what little money I could, opening a secret bank account in preparation for my eventual escape. Meanwhile, Lila and I began subtly undermining Nathan's control in small ways. We would accidentally leave doors unlocked, misplace his belongings, and question his decisions in front of others. It was a dangerous game, but one that slowly chipped away at his perceived dominance. What's wrong with you two? He would rage, his face contorted in fury. Are you trying to make me look like a fool? Of course not, dear, I would reply, feigning innocence. We're just a bit forgetful sometimes. Lila would nod solemnly, her big eyes guileless. Nathan would fume, his jaw clenched, but he could never quite catch us in an outright act of defiance. As the weeks passed, the tension in our home became a palpable force, like a gathering storm on the horizon. Nathan grew increasingly volatile, his temper igniting at the slightest provocation. It was during one of these outbursts that the final catalyst for our escape plan occurred. "You ungrateful wretches!" Nathan bellowed, slamming his fist on the table hard enough to make the dishes rattle. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me?" Lila flinched, but I held her gaze steady, refusing to cower. "What exactly have you done for us, Nathan?" I asked, my voice deceptively calm. "Aside from making our lives a living hell." His eyes widened in disbelief, and for a moment I thought he might strike me. But Lila's small hand slipped into mine, anchoring me, and I felt a surge of strength. "You think you can intimidate us with your tantrums?" I continued, my voice growing in confidence. "Those days are over. We're not afraid of you anymore." Nathan's face turned an alarming shade of red, and he opened his mouth to unleash another torrent of abuse. But this time, I didn't let him. "Save your breath," I said, rising from the table. "We're leaving, Nathan, tonight." His eyes narrowed, and a cruel sneer twisted his lips. "You'll never make it without me. I'll find you, and when I do—" But I didn't let him finish. With Lila's hand in mine, I turned and walked away, leaving him sputtering in impotent rage behind us. As we packed our meager belongings, a sense of determination surged through me. The storm had gathered, and now it was time to weather it, no matter what stood in our way. In the days following our declaration to leave, Nathan's behavior became increasingly erratic and menacing. It was as if he sensed the impending loss of control, and it drove him into a frenzy of desperation. "You think you can just walk away from me?" he snarled one evening, cornering me in the kitchen while Lila was at school. "After everything I've given you?" I stood my ground, refusing to cower. "You've given us nothing but misery, Nathan. We deserve better." His eyes narrowed, and he took a step closer, invading my personal space. "Better? You ungrateful bitch. Without me, you'd be nothing." The stale scent of alcohol on his breath made my stomach churn, but I held firm, my heart pounding in my chest. "That's where you're wrong," I said, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. "Without you, we'll finally be free." A muscle twitched in his jaw, and for a moment I thought he might strike me. But then a cruel smile spread across his face, sending a chill down my spine. "Free?" he scoffed. "You'll never be free of me, Janelle. I own you, and I own that little brat of a daughter you've turned against me." My hands clenched into fists at my sides, and I had to bite back the urge to lash out. "You don't own us, Nathan," I ground out, my voice trembling with barely contained fury. "We're not your possessions." His smile twisted into a sneer, and he leaned in closer, his breath hot on my face. "We'll see about that." Before I could react, he grabbed my arm in a vice-like grip, his fingers digging into my flesh. I cried out in pain, instinctively trying to pull away, but he held fast. "Let go of me," I demanded, but my words only seemed to fuel his rage. "Or what?" he taunted, his eyes glinting with malice. "You'll run away like a scared little mouse? You're not going anywhere, Janelle, not until I say so." Panic clawed at my chest as I struggled against his iron grip, but it was no use. He was stronger, fueled by years of pent-up anger and a desperate need for control. Just when I thought I couldn't take any more, a small voice pierced the tension. "Daddy, stop! You're hurting her!" We both froze as Lila stepped into the kitchen, her eyes wide with fear and determination. Nathan's grip on my arm loosened slightly, but he didn't release me. "Stay out of this, Lila," he growled. "This is between your mother and me." But Lila didn't back down. "No, Daddy, it's not just about you anymore. We're leaving, and you can't stop us." Nathan's face contorted with rage, and he shoved me aside, turning his attention to our daughter. "You little brat! You think you can talk to me like that?" Before he could take a step towards her, I placed myself between them, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and resolve. "Don't you dare touch her," I warned, my voice low and unwavering. Nathan's eyes widened in disbelief, and for a moment he seemed taken aback by my defiance. "Or what?" he sneered, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his gaze. I squared my shoulders, drawing strength from Lila's unwavering presence behind me. "Or you'll regret it," I said, my words carrying a weight and conviction I'd never felt before. "This ends now, Nathan. One way or another, we're walking out of here, and you can't stop us." His eyes narrowed, and he clenched his fists at his sides, his whole body trembling with barely contained fury. For a moment I thought he might strike out in a blind rage. But then something shifted in his expression, a glimmer of realization that his power was slipping through his fingers like sand. With a snarl of impotent rage, he turned and stormed out of the kitchen, leaving Lila and me standing together, our bond stronger than ever. As I pulled my daughter into a fierce embrace, I knew that the tide had turned. Nathan's desperation had pushed us to our limits, and now there was no going back. The time for our escape had come. In the aftermath of Nathan's explosive outburst, Lila and I huddled together, our hearts still racing from the confrontation. It was a harsh reminder that our plan to escape had to move forward, no matter the risks. As I held my daughter close, trying to soothe her trembling, a sudden knock at the door made us both jump. My blood ran cold, fearing it was Nathan, returned to unleash his fury once more. But when I cautiously peered through the peephole, I was greeted by an unexpected sight. Nathan's business partner, Michael, shifting nervously on the doorstep. "Janelle," he said in a hushed voice when I cracked the door open. "I need to talk to you. It's important." I hesitated, glancing back at Lila, who nodded in silent encouragement. With trembling hands, I ushered Michael inside, my mind racing with possibilities. Once the door was closed, Michael didn't waste any time. "Janelle, I know what's been going on," he said, his voice laced with a mix of shame and determination. "The way Nathan treats you, the way he rules through fear and intimidation, it's not right." My heart skipped a beat as I processed his words. Had our struggles been visible to outsiders all along? Michael must have sensed my trepidation, for he pressed on. "I'm not the only one who's seen it, Janelle. There are others at the firm who know the truth about Nathan's behavior, both at home and at work." A flicker of hope ignited within me, even as dread coiled in my stomach. If Nathan's colleagues were aware of his true nature, it could either be our salvation or our downfall. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Michael's gaze hardened with resolve. "We've been documenting his actions, gathering evidence of his unethical practices and abuse of power. It's only a matter of time before the truth comes out and he's held accountable." I couldn't help but glance at Lila, a silent question in my eyes. She gave a slight nod, and I turned back to Michael, steeling my nerves. "And what does this have to do with us?" I asked, my voice stronger now. Michael's expression softened, a hint of sympathy in his eyes. "Janelle, we know what he's put you through, and we want to help." My breath caught in my throat as the weight of his words settled over me. Help, a lifeline we hadn't dared to hope for. "How?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of hope and trepidation. Michael reached into his jacket pocket and produced a small flash drive. "This contains evidence of Nathan's misdeeds, both personal and professional. Enough to ensure he can never hurt you again." He extended the drive towards me, his gaze unwavering. "Take it, Janelle. Use it to protect yourself and your daughter, and know that you have allies, even in the shadows." My hand trembled as I reached out and took the drive, its weight seeming to anchor me in that surreal moment. Allies. A concept so foreign yet so desperately needed. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what to say." Michael shook his head, a grim smile tugging at his lips. "Don't thank me. Just promise me you'll use it to get away from him. For good." I nodded, resolute determination surging through me. "I promise." As Michael turned to leave, he paused, his hand on the doorknob. "One more thing, Janelle. Be careful. Nathan is a dangerous man, and he'll stop at nothing to maintain his control." His words sent a chill down my spine, but I refused to let fear rule me any longer. "We'll be ready," I said, my voice steeled with conviction. Michael gave a solemn nod and slipped out into the night, leaving Lila and me to ponder our newfound allies and the weight of the evidence we now possessed. As I clutched the flash drive in my hand, I knew our escape plan had taken on a new urgency. The storm clouds were gathering, and this time we wouldn't be facing them alone. The weight of Michael's evidence, combined with the knowledge that we had allies working behind the scenes, lent a newfound sense of urgency to our escape plan. Lila and I knew we had to move quickly, before Nathan caught wind of the growing storm swirling around him. In the days that followed, we worked tirelessly, gathering what meager belongings we could carry and stockpiling supplies for our journey. Mariah remained our unwavering support, providing us with a safe haven to flee to once the time was right. "Are you sure about this, Janelle?" she asked one night, her voice hushed over the video call. "Once you leave, there's no going back." I glanced at Lila, who was studiously packing her backpack with the essentials we'd need. Her eyes met mine, shining with a determination far beyond her years. "I'm sure," I said, turning back to Mariah with a resolute nod. "We can't live like this anymore. It's time to break free, no matter what it takes." Mariah's expression softened, a mixture of pride and concern etching her features. "All right, just say the word, and I'll be there to pick you up." With our plans in motion, the tension in our household became almost palpable. Nathan seemed to sense the shift in the air, his eyes narrowing with suspicion whenever he caught Lila and me whispering together. "What are you two up to?" he would demand, his voice laced with barely contained fury. We would exchange a pointed look, then turn back to him with feigned innocence. "Nothing, dear, just talking about school." His jaw would clench and his nostrils would flare, but he could never quite catch us in the act of our preparations. Finally, the night of our escape arrived. Nathan had stormed off after another explosive argument, leaving us a narrow window of opportunity to slip away undetected. "Are you ready?" I asked Lila, my heart pounding in my chest as we gathered our meager belongings. She nodded, her small face set in a mask of determination that both broke and swelled my heart. "Ready, Mom." With trembling hands, I dialed Mariah's number, the burner phone feeling like a lifeline in my grasp. "It's time," I whispered when she answered, my voice thick with a mix of fear and exhilaration. "I'm on my way," Mariah responded, her voice steady and reassuring. "Stay strong, Janelle. Help is coming." As we waited for Mariah's arrival, every creak and groan of the old house seemed amplified, setting my nerves on edge. What if Nathan returned early? What if he caught us before we could escape? But then a familiar car pulled up outside, and Lila's small hand slipped into mine, anchoring me in the moment. "Let's go, Mom," she said, her voice trembling but her eyes shining with determination. With a deep breath, I shouldered our meager belongings and followed my daughter out into the night, leaving behind the prison of our former life. As we slipped into Mariah's waiting car, I couldn't help but glance back at the house one last time. The curtains in Nathan's study fluttered, and for a fleeting moment I thought I saw his silhouette in the window, watching our escape. A shiver ran down my spine, but I refused to let fear take hold. Not this time. "Drive," I said, my voice firm and unwavering. Mariah didn't need to be told twice. With a sharp nod, she peeled away from the curb, whisking us into the night and towards an uncertain future, but one that was ours to shape, free from Nathan's oppressive shadow. As the miles stretched between us and our former prison, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, replaced by a sense of exhilaration and newfound determination. We were free. And nothing, not even Nathan's wrath, would ever shackle us again. In the weeks following our daring escape, Lila and I found ourselves constantly looking over our shoulders, half expecting Nathan to appear and drag us back into his web of control and abuse. But as the days turned into weeks, and we settled into our new life with Mariah's support, the constant fear gradually gave way to a sense of cautious hope. It was during this transition that the first cracks in Nathan's carefully constructed facade began to show. Whispers of his unethical business practices and abusive behavior started to circulate, fueled by the anonymous leaks of evidence from his former colleagues. At first, the rumors were little more than idle gossip, easily dismissed by Nathan's legal team and PR machine. But as more and more damning evidence came to light, the scrutiny intensified, quickly spiraling into a full-blown media firestorm. "Have you seen the news?" Mariah asked one morning, her voice laced with a mixture of triumph and concern as she handed me a newspaper. My heart skipped a beat as I took in the headlines, emblazoned across the front page: "Local businessmen accused of abuse and corporate misconduct." Accompanying the article was a grainy photo of Nathan, his face twisted in a snarl as he pushed past a crowd of reporters. The caption read, "Moore denies allegations, vows legal retaliation." I felt a surge of conflicting emotions, relief that the truth was finally coming to light, tempered by the lingering fear that Nathan's wrath would inevitably find us. "He's not going to let this go, is he?" I murmured, my fingers tracing the lines of his enraged expression. Mariah shook her head grimly. "Probably not, but we're ready for him, Janelle. He can't hurt you anymore." Her words were a sobering reminder of the allies we had in our corner, the ones who had risked everything to expose Nathan's misdeeds and provide us with the evidence we needed to protect ourselves. As the days wore on, the media frenzy around Nathan's scandals only intensified. Reporters camped outside his office and home, shouting questions and snapping photos, as he tried in vain to maintain his crumbling facade of control. "No comment," he would snarl, pushing his way through the throngs of journalists, his face contorted with fury. But the leaks kept coming, each new revelation more damning than the last. Evidence of financial misdeeds, sexual misconduct allegations, and even whispers of criminal activity. It was as if a floodgate had been opened, and Nathan's carefully curated image was being washed away by the torrent of truth. Through it all, Lila and I watched from the safety of our new home, a strange sense of karmic justice washing over us as we witnessed Nathan's downfall unfold. "He deserves it, doesn't he, Mom?" Lila asked one evening, her eyes glued to the news coverage of yet another damaging expose. I hesitated, torn between the desire for retribution and the lingering fear that Nathan's reach might still extend beyond our grasp. "I don't know, honey," I said finally, pulling her close. "But what I do know is that he can't hurt us anymore. We're safe, and that's all that matters." Lila nodded, her brow furrowed as she considered my words. Then a small smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. "I'm glad he's getting what he deserves," she said, her voice laced with a conviction far beyond her years. "After everything he did to us, it's only fair." As I looked into her eyes, shining with a newfound strength and resilience, I couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. My daughter, once so small and vulnerable in the face of Nathan's rage, had emerged as a fierce warrior, her spirit unbroken by the trials we'd endured. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what the future held, we would face it together, stronger, wiser, and forever free from the shackles of Nathan's oppression. His empire might crumble, his reputation lie in tatters, but we had something far more precious: our freedom, our dignity, and a bond that not even his most vicious attacks could sever. As the news continued to document Nathan's rapid descent into disgrace, a part of me couldn't help but revel in the sweet taste of revenge, not for myself, but for the countless others who had suffered under his tyranny. The monster had been exposed, and now he would reap the consequences of his actions, one devastating blow at a time. As the dust settled on Nathan's spectacular fall from grace, Lila and I found ourselves standing at a crossroads, faced with the daunting task of rebuilding our lives from the ashes of our former existence. "Where do we go from here, Mom?" Lila asked one evening as we sat together, the flickering glow of the TV illuminating her pensive expression. I exhaled slowly, pondering her question. For so long our world had revolved around survival, dodging Nathan's fury, plotting our escape, clinging to the hope of freedom. But now that we had achieved that elusive goal, the path forward seemed simultaneously daunting and exhilarating. "Anywhere we want, honey," I said finally, reaching out to tuck a stray strand of hair behind her ear. "The world is ours now." A small smile tugged at the corners of Lila's mouth, and I saw a glimmer of the carefree child she had once been before the weight of Nathan's oppression had stolen her innocence. "I like the sound of that," she murmured, her eyes sparkling with newfound hope. In the weeks that followed, Lila and I made the difficult decision to leave our temporary sanctuary with Mariah and strike out on our own. As much as we were grateful for her unwavering support, we both felt the need to forge our own path, free from the lingering shadows of our past. With the help of the evidence provided by Nathan's former colleagues, I was able to secure a modest settlement from his rapidly crumbling empire. Not nearly enough to compensate for the years of torment, but a start nonetheless. And so, armed with our meager belongings and a newfound sense of determination, Lila and I set off for a fresh start in a new town, leaving the specter of Nathan's abuse firmly in our rearview mirror. As we settled into our cozy apartment, unpacking the few possessions we had managed to salvage, I couldn't help but marvel at the journey that had brought us to this point. The strength it had taken to break free, the courage to face the unknown, and the resilience to forge ahead in the face of overwhelming adversity. "Are you happy, Mom?" Lila asked one evening as we sat together on our second-hand couch, the scent of takeout pizza wafting through the air. I looked around our modest surroundings, taking in the mismatched furniture and the peeling paint on the walls. To an outsider, it might have seemed like a life of hardship and struggle. But in that moment, all I felt was a profound sense of contentment and gratitude. "Happier than I've been in a very long time," I replied, pulling her into a warm embrace. Lila snuggled against me, a contented sigh escaping her lips. "Me too, Mom. Me too." In the months that followed, Nathan's name faded from the headlines, his misdeeds and scandals replaced by the next sensational story du jour. But for us, his legacy lived on in the scars we bore, both physical and emotional, and the hard-won lessons we had etched into our souls. I would be lying if I said his shadow didn't linger, casting occasional doubts and fears across our newfound peace. But each time those whispers of the past threatened to overwhelm us, we would draw strength from the bond we had forged in the fires of our struggle. We were survivors, warriors, and above all, a family united by an unbreakable love that had carried us through the darkest of storms. And as I watched Lila blossom into a confident, compassionate young woman, her laughter ringing through our little apartment, I knew that our story was one of triumph over adversity, a testament to the indomitable spirit that had guided us to freedom. Nathan's reign of terror was over, his power and influence reduced to ashes. But from those ashes we had risen like a phoenix, our wings spread wide as we soared towards a future of our own making. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, unbroken, unstoppable, and forever free.